Chapter 1275. A familiar scene. A strange scene. The beginning of everything. The end of everything. His vision and perception became clear from the trance. There was a messy and bleak snow around him. The snow covered the mountains. The broken base was full of corpses and pieces of flesh. Internal organs and limbs were scattered everywhere. Dark red blood flowed on the white snow like a weird snake. The shocking red converged in one place and flowed along the hillside like a small river. The pain was heart-wrenching. The familiar sword energy tore every inch of the tendons and vessels in his body with terrifying energy, wantonly destroying the internal organs. Exhaustion came after the sharp pain. The wind and snow were messy all over the sky. Li Kuangtu struggled to keep his eyes open. At the forefront of his sight was a red dress, bleak and beautiful as blood. Her black hair danced wildly in the wind and snow. This was a face that Li Kuangtu was very familiar with, but it was also a somewhat strange face. The delicate and sharp lines of her face were as perfect as a dream. Unlike his impression of her, who most of the time wore no makeup, she had carefully put on light makeup. Her eyelashes were long, her forehead was smooth, and her lips were bright. Her hair, which had been carefully combed, was completely loose. Her face was extremely pale, which formed an incomparably dazzling contrast with the mournful red dress she was wearing. This was Qin Weibai. But it seemed not. This was an indescribable cognitive disorder. The woman in front of him seemed to have completely left only a perfect body. All feelings, desires, and souls had disappeared. The pair of eyes that always seemed very bright and deep in his impression now only had a dead silence and numbness, with only a touch of near-eternal obsession. The pain was still going on. But Li Kuangtu's heart sank for no reason. He looked at the woman in front of him quietly. A strong and strange but extremely pure fear seemed to completely jump out from the depths of his soul, freezing every inch of his muscles, every drop of blood, and even his thoughts and soul. It was not because the giant sword in the other party's hand had pierced his chest. In this state, Qin Weibai, who he had never seen before, gave him a kind of extreme uneasiness. In this kind of emotion, Qin Weibai seemed to take everything for granted. In the clear image, the darkness had completely faded away. Li Kuangtu heard his own voice. Weak, hoarse, tired, twisted, and powerless. Forcefully breaking through cough. You won't live for long. Yitha. Gu Xianin, are you regretting it? In his sight, the woman in red raised her head stiffly and looked into his eyes blankly. Her voice was slow and hoarse. You will regret it more than me. Kacha, the huge sword that had pierced into his chest, instantly split up and turned into many exquisite little swords. The wind and snow rose and fell wildly along with the sword energy. The chaotic sword light without any rhythm continued to spread out with the woman in red as the center. Li Kuangtu and Qin Weibai's vision instantly flew away. This was indeed an immersive movie. But the man who showed them the movie was not a good storyteller. Therefore, there was no foreshadowing or narration. Perhaps in the other party's heart, it was not a very important matter at all. What he wanted to do was to present all the blood and slaughter in the clearest and cruelest way before the two of them. Qin Weibai and Li Kuangtu's vision spread to the entire base. The base was a mixture of red and white. Flowing blood. Melting snow. One after another, exquisite little swords shuttled through the base with rainbow-like sword energy. The elites who were still alive in the base struggled desperately. The sword energy swept past. The crowd suddenly exploded. Yes, it exploded. Like a bomb, flesh and blood flew all over the sky. The struggling elites became minced meat on the ground. Not to mention the original image, even the various parts could not be pieced together. The elites who were still alive in the entire base were completely wiped out by the sword energy. No one survived and no one had a whole body. The surging sword energy spread out of the base with the wind and snow like a wave. Qin Weibai and Li Kuangtu's vision also spread out of the base. The sword energy cut off a nearby mountain. The fleeing crowd appeared in their vision. Li Kuangtu could not feel his body. However, his consciousness suddenly stiffened. In the fleeing crowd, familiar figures appeared in front of him one after another. Daybreak with a ferocious and resentful look. Dawn with a dignified expression. Phoenix with a deeply worried expression. Phoenix was holding a boy about 10 years old in her hand. A close-up shot of the scene was constantly changing. Li Su, who was still in charge of all the intelligence work in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Li Lan, the current chief butler of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Li Yuan, the current senior guest of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. And at the back of the crowd, a young man who looked less than 30 years old. The young man was wearing a red robe with a phoenix pattern, decorated with the 12 movements representing the sun, the moon, and the stars, which were complicated and gorgeous. Although his appearance was not too outstanding, he had a kind of calmness and majesty that did not match his age. Both Qin Weibai and Li Kuangtu knew very well what this decoration meant. This was the 12 movements and the robe with a phoenix pattern that represented the emperor's decoration in East Island, which would only appear on one person. The Mikado of East Island. Li Kuangtu's consciousness trembled violently. His vision was fixed on the young man in the robe with a phoenix pattern. This was not the son he remembered. Because when his son died, he was less than 20 years old. But now, he was nearly 30 years old, and his facial features had lost their childishness. The complicated and gorgeous clothes were all so familiar, perfectly in line with his original plan. At the back of the crowd, the extremely young heavenly emperor of Huawu raised his arm. Memories surged in like a tidal wave. Li Kuangtu might still be a little confused. But Qin Weibai's memory was completely awakened. She finally knew where she was. This was another time and space. Everything she was seeing now was something that had happened before, something that she had done with her own hands. This was the holy mountain of East Island, a secret base belonging to the royal family. And everything in front of her was the scene when she took ruthless revenge. The child she killed in Ninghu that year. The heavenly emperor of Huawu now. Two memories, different time and space, and the chaotic reality made her calm mind constantly distorted. She began to recall everything that happened on this day. She recalled what she once said. That day, she failed to kill the heavenly emperor of Huawu after all. That day, a lunatic who overdrew his vitality and a long sword that overdrew his energy could be said to be truly invincible in the world. But compared with the heavenly emperor of Huawu, she had someone she wanted to kill more. The violent sword energy gathered at the moment when Huawu raised his arm. Two incomparably powerful sword chis collided in midair. The horrible sword energy swept across the area. The surrounding snow-capped mountains shook wildly, and the snow was like a landslide, swirling in the air. The heavenly emperor of Huawu, who forcibly blocked the sword, was thrown into the air. Blood splashed. Before his body landed on the ground, a faint white mist began to spread all over his body. The horrible avalanche began to cover everything. The perspective of Li Kuangtu and Qin Weibai seemed to become snowflakes one after another, clearly seeing the crowd under the avalanche. No! No! Li Kuangtu roared silently, but he couldn't make any sound. From his perspective, he saw Phoenix buried in the snow and the child in his hand. The moment the snow fell, a delicate small sword had pierced through a large amount of snow, and the endless sword energy shook Phoenix and the child out. The sword light crisscrossed. From top to bottom, the edge cut through Phoenix's scalp, spine, two swords, legs, and then gently cut off the child's limbs. Blood dripped quickly, but none of the wounds were vital. The child's cry and Phoenix's scream were heart-wrenching. Their bodies, which were not dead, fell into the flying snow and were covered by the snow layer by layer. The blood and the snow mixed together, turning white with red, and finally became pure white. Another small sword pierced Dawn's eyes with sword energy and cut off his legs. Dawn, dragging half of his body, roared and wanted to fight back, but he couldn't even find his opponent. Death spread everywhere in the avalanche. People from the Li family were dying. The extremely precious Li Consortium veterans who had been preserved were tortured in extremely cruel ways until they were half dead. Then they were all buried in the snow. Among these people, Li Kuangtu saw not only a part of the people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but also some people in Emperor Dong's palace. But it didn't work. Everyone received the same treatment. They were all tortured and killed by the small swords in an almost inhumane and insidious way. Li Guangtu's consciousness trembled violently. Extreme, paranoid, or arrogant, no matter what, he really had feelings for the Li family. This feeling was deeply engraved in his bones and soul, and it could even be said to be the driving force for him to live. He never thought that the Li family would face such a scene. People close to him were killed one by one. He was also stabbed in the heart by the madman. The Li family was withering at a speed that was close to extinction. Collapse, anger, hatred, resentment, and unwillingness. His emotions began to become extremely chaotic. In the extreme chaos, he heard the woman's voice. "You win. You win." The two voices sounded almost at the same time. One was the voice from the perspective. It was dead silent, numb, stiff, and slow. The other was beside him. It was a little complicated, a little nostalgic, and with pleasure. Why could Qin Weibai speak? Li Guangtu wanted to turn around, but he couldn't feel his body. There was no one in his perception. Because he was watching a movie. He was there, so he naturally couldn't see another person outside the movie. Then he heard his own voice again. Crazy, hoarse, with resentment and pleasure. "I will die, but the Li family will not die. I will die, but the Li family will not be destroyed. Ha! Li Tianlan has fallen. You killed him, but you failed to kill Huawu today. The Li family is mine. It belongs to Huawu. It belongs to the people of the Li family. Ha! I want to thank you. Thank you for killing that bastard." The moment the screams suddenly sounded, Li Guangtu felt pain again. He saw the woman in red stretch out her hands and gouge out his eyes. But this was a movie. He could still see the picture. He saw himself with blood spurting out of his eyes. The voice beside him sounded again, almost murmuring, "I don't like your eyes." "Your eyes? You don't like them? I wanted to do this a long time ago." The madwoman in red murmured and threw the two eyeballs aside. Li Guangtu saw his expression completely distorted, becoming extremely ferocious and crazier at the same time. "You killed him. Hanlun Dongxinghuang, you killed him, you killed him, you killed him." Swish! An arm flew directly into the air. "You killed him. You killed him. You killed him." His vitality was fading rapidly. Li Guangtu, who was furious, began to vent his resentment like crazy. He knew what words could irritate the madwoman in front of him the most, so he kept repeating them. Another arm flew into the air. Then the feet. Knee. The internal organs were scattered on the ground after being cut at the waist. The heart had been pierced. Even the vitality of the peak of the invincible realm was rapidly disappearing at this time. The completely crazy woman didn't stop. She held the reassembled giant sword in her hand and stabbed his upper body again and again, tearing his face, mouth, and throat. Blood splashed everywhere. Li Guangtu was dead. He was like a machine. It was dismantled into pieces by the woman who had completely gone mad. From the beginning to the end, the woman's expression and eyes didn't change at all. They were numb and dead. It wasn't until Li Guangtu was completely dead that she suddenly laughed while standing in the broken bodies on the ground. The laughter was sharp and hollow, like crying, but also like laughing. She was really crazy. The mountain was covered with snow. The mountain was covered with blood. Li Guangtu's consciousness watched silently. He seemed to have entered the cold winter and the abyss, wrapped in the cold. The bloody and cruel pictures were playing in a loop in silence. The darkness swallowed him again. The voice was still one step ahead of the light. "Where are the children? How could you two lose sight of two children who are only a few years old together?" In the voice with hidden anger, some vague light tore the darkness. Li Guangtu saw a somewhat familiar young face. He was not familiar because he had never spoken to him. He looked familiar because Li Guangtu had been paying attention to him. In today's Zhongzhou state, outside of movies, this young man was not very famous. But in the eyes of real people, he could definitely be said to be one of the most important young people in Zhongzhou state. Lin Yuxian of the Lin clan. Lin Yuxian in the picture was different from Li Guangtu's impression. He seemed to have not left the Lin clan, so compared with Lin Yuxian of Emperor Dong's palace, who was calm and tactful, he was more wanton and casual now. Li Guangtu knew the place in the picture. It should be a 5-star hotel in Huading, one of the few properties of the Lin clan in Huading. He had stayed there for a few days. Li Guangtu didn't understand what it meant. He just quietly watched the movie in front of him. Qin Weibai's mood obviously began to fluctuate violently. Don't worry, young master. Don't worry, young master. We are looking for them. Within 3 days, we promise to find the 2 children. You bastards! What are you doing every day? You can't even look after the 2 children. Useless. What the hell is going on? Tell me. Young master, the 2 children were brought back by the patriarch. He told us to take good care of them. He would bring them back to the headquarters after he finished his work. We don't know the origin of the children, but in the morning, a woman suddenly came and said that she wanted to see her children. What kind of woman? I can't describe it. A very beautiful woman, no, a woman who looked perfect. She wore red clothes and carried a sword on her back. Young master, the woman's mental state was very abnormal. She looked like a lunatic. She didn't say a few words, but she had already injured several security guards. Then she rushed in. She was so fast that we couldn't stop her. At that time, the whole hotel was looking for the woman. The situation was too chaotic. The 2 children also ran out at that time. It was the elder sister who pulled the younger brother. Lin Yuxian was silent for a moment. His expression became colder and colder. In the morning? It's night now. The children were lost in the morning. How far can they run? You have been looking for them all day, but you still haven't found them? Go and find them. What are you standing here for? Go and find them. If you can't find them, don't come back. Late at night. In the outer suburbs where the neon lights of Huading could not reach. The garbage dump was full of moonlight. The little figure was rummaging carefully in the garbage dump. The air of the midsummer night was hot with dullness. Under the bright moonlight, it was the figure of a little girl. She looked to be at most 5 or 6 years old. Her body was thin and weak, and her clothes were dirty. Sweat flowed down her face. Her eyes were wide open, and her small hand was holding half a piece of dusty bread. Her action of rummaging through the trash was serious and persistent. The garbage made a slight sound in the process of being rummaged. After a long time, the little girl whispered, squatted down, moved a small half of the watermelon in the garbage dump, and took out a carton of milk that had been mostly drunk. She stretched out her hand and wiped the straw on the milk carton hard. Then she took a small sip carefully. The milk seemed to have been thrown away not long ago, so it did not go bad. The girl held the bread and the milk in her arms. She smiled with some joy. It was very sweet. She raised the hard bread in her hand and took a bite. She held the half carton of milk in her arms and was ready to turn away. Can't you drink the thing in your arms? A somewhat gentle voice sounded. The girl was startled. She really jumped up. She instinctively protected the milk, opened her eyes wide, and looked ahead vigilantly. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s stood there. His body was as stiff as a statue. His clothes were neat, and his temples were gray, but his appearance was elegant. Although he was no longer young, he still exuded a kind of carefree and casual aura. Wave after wave of sword chi spread out in all directions with him as the center, covering the entire junkyard and several dilapidated houses near the junkyard. The sword chi sensed everything. Finally, in a small room, he sensed the baby who was biting his finger. The middle-aged man breathed a sigh of relief, and his whole body seemed to relax all of a sudden. He slowly took a few steps forward and approached the little girl. The little girl held the milk and instinctively retreated, but she seemed to think of something and stopped again. She just opened her eyes and asked, "Are you here to catch me?" She could barely remember things at her age. She knew that many people were now trying to catch her, but during this period of time, the number of people catching her seemed to have decreased. "Someone is catching you?" The middle-aged man was stunned. The girl nodded and said softly, "Yes, I was almost caught by them once. I ran to a crowded place. Many uncles and aunties helped me, and the bad guys were scared away." She looked up at him and said, "Where are you going to take me?" Her big eyes were filled with tears, and she was a little desperate. She said with a sobbing tone, "I'll go with you. I'm not here to catch you. The middle-aged man sighed softly and touched the girl's head. I've been looking for you for almost half a year, and I've finally found you. I'll take you home. Children might not be able to distinguish right from wrong, but they could feel pure kindness and malice. The girl stared at him for a while, and her body slowly relaxed. The man reached out to grab the half carton of milk that the girl was holding tightly. He pulled but did not move. He was slightly stunned. The girl was a little nervous again. She hesitated and whispered, "Ok? Brother wants to drink it." According to her experience, this small half carton of milk and some breadcrumbs on the soft part of the bread were enough for her brother to eat for a day. The middle-aged man, who was used to all kinds of tragedies, suddenly felt a lump in his throat. He forced a smile and said, "It's okay. I found the best nanny." Although he said that, he did not grab the half carton of milk that represented food in the girl's heart. He squatted down, looked at the girl, and said softly, "Do you remember me?" The girl looked at him blankly and shook her head slightly. "Your aunt asked me to take care of you and your brother. Half a year ago, I put you in a hotel and said that I would take you home in a few days. Do you remember? How did you get out later?" The middle-aged man asked softly. The girl thought about it seriously and said hesitantly, "I saw my aunt. I took my brother to find my aunt. Brother wants to drink milk." She seemed to have thought of something and looked at the middle-aged man happily. "Where is my aunt?" The middle-aged man's eyes became extremely complicated. He reached out to touch the girl's head and said softly, "She went to a place far, far away." The girl blinked and said softly, "When will she come back?" "It will probably take a very long time, right?" The girl was silent. She vaguely realized something, but she didn't fully understand it. After a long time, she said softly, "Can you help me take care of my brother?" She was only a few years old, but she had to take care of a baby. One could imagine how difficult it was to survive. However, even in the most difficult situation, she had never thought of leaving her brother behind. She didn't understand the deep love between siblings at her age. She just instinctively felt that she couldn't leave her brother behind. "I'll take you home. I promise that I can give you the best life," the middle-aged man said seriously. The girl nodded and asked expectantly, "Does that mean I don't have to beg for food? And I don't have to cut off a leg? The uncle said that when I grow up, I can use it. I can also cut off a leg to beg for food. They will take care of me and my brother." The middle-aged man's mouth twitched. He knew who the uncles the girl was talking about were. Before he came, he had already killed all of those scum and dismembered them. "Of course, all of you must be healthy and safe," Yizichin said. He held the girl's hand. Sword chi surged, and the two of them arrived at the shabby little room. On the little bed in the room, the baby who didn't cry or make a fuss looked at the man with his black eyes. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and smiled. The murderous sword chi and the smell of blood were still lingering around him. The baby seemed to like this atmosphere and became happier and happier. The man carefully carried the baby, looked at the girl next to him, held his little hand, and asked, "Do you still remember your names?" "I remember." The girl nodded seriously. "My name is Dong Qingyu. My brother is Li Dong Cheng. Aunt said that I can never forget." The man was silent for a while, then nodded and said softly, "Then I will never forget." "Uncle, what's your name?" The girl blinked her eyes. The man smiled, touched her head, and said softly, "My name is Lin Fengting." Chapter 1276. Dad. In a small bedroom where every detail was meticulously arranged, a 3-year-old child was holding a somewhat rough wooden sword in his chubby little hand, shouting with a tender voice. "It's Godfather. Dongqing, I'm Godfather. Call me Godfather." Lin Yuxian looked at the little boy on the bed seriously. "Good son, look at my mouth. Godfather." The 3-year-old child looked at Lin Yuxian blankly and then nodded seriously. Yes. Lin Yuxian was speechless. He turned to look at Dong Qingyu beside him and said seriously, Do you think he's playing with me?" "I don't know, Uncle Lin." Dong Qingyu's face was red because she was holding back her laughter. She sat at the small table in the corner of the bedroom. She was dressed in exquisite and gorgeous clothes. Her face was rosy and her eyes were shining. She looked like a little princess. She was holding the doll that Lin Yuxian had just given her in her arms. The sweet smile on her face made people's hearts tremble. "You are also a little slippery." Lin Yuxian snorted and took out the toy car behind him. "Good son, call me Godfather. If you call me Godfather, I'll give you the toy car, okay?" He moved faster and put the toy in front of the boy first. "Dad?" The boy's voice was still childish. He held the wooden sword and pushed the toy car aside with some disgust. "Well, if the car doesn't like it, how about the airplane, tank, transformer, Ultraman?" Lin Yuxian chattered endlessly and was in high spirits. In recent years, he had rarely been in the headquarters of the Lin clan. He only came back a few times a year. But every time he came back, the first thing he did was to see his adopted son, and then to see his father. Then he came back to accompany his adopted son until he left again. Li Dongqing didn't have a nickname. He just had his 3rd birthday and spoke very late. So far, he could only say a few words. But he was very flexible and walked much earlier than other children of the same age. After he was brought back to the Lin clan, different departments of the Lin clan jointly checked his body very carefully. Li Dongqing's blood had an extremely high oxygen content. Not high, but extremely high, incredibly high. At the same time, the child's spine was also very strong, which could connect the limbs to the greatest extent. Furthermore, his body's coordination and balance were unbelievable. All of this was visible to the naked eye. This child did not inherit his father's wind and thunder veins, but from a certain point of view, he could be considered to have a unique constitution that had never appeared before. It could even be said that this child had an unprecedented talent for martial arts. His spine was so tough that current biological knowledge could not explain it. This meant that his future path of martial arts would not encounter any bottlenecks. What is a bottleneck? That was because of the body. Even if one was talented in martial arts, they had no choice but to compromise. Why is it so rare to see an expert of the thunder-shocking realm around the age of 20 in the dark world? Many geniuses could reach the peak of the fire-flaming realm at this age, but they couldn't go any further. It wasn't that he couldn't, but that he didn't dare. Because their physical strength had not reached the point where they could withstand the power of the thunder-shocking realm. Why is there almost no invincible realm experts under 30 in the dark world? The reason was the same. The bottleneck of physical strength was almost non-existent for Li Dongqing. As long as he could grow up, with his physical quality, it was possible for him to reach the invincible realm at the age of 20. Absolutely brilliant, this was a true super genius. More importantly, compared to Li Dongqing's inconceivable body, what was even more incomprehensible was his personality. Li Dongqing was very quiet. Children who were just a few years old were usually prone to crying and throwing tantrums. However, Li Dongqing rarely cried. In other words, he had almost never cried before. He drank milk quietly. He slept peacefully. He woke up quietly. He quietly grabbed the somewhat rough and unsightly small wooden sword and played with it until he fell asleep. When someone played with him, he would cooperate. When no one played with him, he would play by himself. Many people said that they had never seen such a well-behaved child. So well-behaved, with a kind of depression that was almost incomprehensible. Moreover, this child was also extremely sensitive to murderous intent and sword intent. But the way this sensitivity was expressed was not fear and rejection, but closeness and joy. So every time Lin Yuxian came back from the outside, he was very popular with Li Dongqing with the murderous intent and sword intent that had not yet dissipated. The word, daddy, was also learned in this kind of meeting that was not very frequent. And all of this, whether it was his temperament or his body, seemed to prove that this 3-year-old child was destined to have a brilliant future on the path of martial arts that no one could look directly at. It was indeed difficult to see more things from a 3-year-old child. But just what could be seen was enough to make people sure of this point. Lin Yuxian watched quietly. Li Dongqing held the small wooden sword in his hand and slashed the newly bought toy car, making a clanging sound. Tut tut. Lin Yuxian sighed softly, touched Li Dongqing's head, and whispered, "Good son, every time I see you I can't wait to work harder." It is because I can see you every time that I have the motivation and courage to continue to go out. Li Dongqing, who was playing with the small wooden sword in his hand, raised his head in confusion. Then he got up quickly, opened his hands, and trotted into Lin Yuxian's arms. Lin Yuxian snorted softly, but he laughed and kissed the little face in front of him. Behind the adult and the child, Dongqing Yu, who was dressed like a little princess, quietly ate a piece of dessert. Her eyes were wide open. In her sight, a stream of blood was slowly flowing down Lin Yuxian's back, soaking his light-colored suit. Master, Godfather. The 7-year-old boy trotted over and bowed seriously with a calm voice. Lin Fengting picked up the teacup and took a sip. He looked at the boy in front of him, and then looked at Lin Yuxian sitting next to him. He suddenly said, "This child calls me master and you godfather, making us look like peers. I am your father. Do you feel that you are taking advantage of me?" Lin Yuxian, who had been sitting on the sofa, sat up straight with some difficulty. He smiled and waved to the boy. "Dongqing, come here." He pulled the boy over and hugged him. The boy's figure was a little thin, but he was very tall compared with his peers. He looked healthy and steady. It was not appropriate for him to sit on his lap like he did when he was a child. Lin Yuxian touched his head in a trance. He was a little embarrassed. "Huang Tu and I are brothers. His son calls me godfather. It is natural for his son to call me godfather. It was you who insisted on taking this apprentice from me. Otherwise, Dongqing would call you grandpa now. Otherwise, Dongqing would have been better." Lin Fengting, who was in his 60s, did not look old, but most of his hair was white. He was more casual than a few years ago. He pointed at Li Dongqing and smiled. "Your godfather was also taught by me. You are my apprentice, so in the future, you can't call him godfather in front of me. You have to call him senior brother, okay?" Li Dongqing smiled and did not speak. "You can't mess up the seniority. Godfather is godfather. Dad, you are not particular about this." Lin Fengting protested. "You are the only one who is particular." Lin Fengting rolled his eyes at his son angrily. "That's right. According to the current sequence in the family, we are of the same lineage. We are far from you." Lin Yuxian was proud. "Not far." Li Dongqing shook his head. He looked at Lin Yuxian and whispered, "Godfather, you haven't been back for a long time." "Yes, the last time was more than a year ago. At that time, you were not so tall." Lin Yuxian touched his godson's head and suddenly smiled. This time, Godfather killed a noble outside. It was a mess. It seemed that he was a duke. He was also a figure in Europe. These years, he had been very unhappy with the royal family. Taking advantage of the cooperation between the two sides, I killed him. "Good son, the royal family said that they would give you a princess as a daughter-in-law. She is 1 year older than you. I brought her photo here whether you want it or not. It doesn't matter if you don't want it. They have 3 princesses, all of whom are good-looking. The oldest one is 5 years older than you, but it doesn't matter. You can choose whatever you want. As long as you agree, the royal family will immediately send the princess here. She will be raised in our family and live with you. When she is of age, she will be your daughter-in-law." Li Dongqing shook his head. "Sister, you won't like it." Lin Fengting and Lin Yuxian were stunned at the same time. "But I was wondering. On the way back, Yaya was not nice to me. She was so fierce." "What's the matter?" Lin Yuxian suddenly understood. Dongqing Yu was 4 years older than Li Dongqing. In the Lin clan, she was a veritable little princess. Many elders almost spoiled her. When she was 10 years old, she officially left the headquarters of the Lin clan and studied with Lin Yuxian. Of course, she did not learn to fight and kill. Now, Dongqing Yu was involved in all the industries under Lin Yuxian's name. Countless top business elites were her teachers. Lin Yuxian obviously wanted to use incomparably huge resources to cultivate a business queen. "Good son, you like your sister." Lin Yuxian joked. "I want my sister to be my wife." Li Dongqing said very seriously. A 7-year-old child naturally did not understand what a wife meant, but Lin Yuxian did not take this sentence as a joke. Instead, he said thoughtfully, "It's not impossible, Bastard! Lin Fengting scolded. Ye and Dongqing are close relatives. They are cousins. What are you thinking about? That's nothing. Lin Yuxian shook his head. In the European land, there are countless cousins in the royal family, Rothschild, and other wealthy families. They say that they want to protect their noble bloodline. Generation after generation, no one has said anything. Not to mention them, in our Zhongzhou state, in ancient times, Fuxi and Yuhua were siblings. Aren't they? Lin Fengting grabbed a grape on the table and threw it over. Where is your fastidiousness? Go to rest. Lin Yuxian coughed dryly. His lips were abnormally pale. He patted Li Dongqing on the shoulder and chuckled softly. It's okay if you don't want a princess. Anyway, you have nothing to lose. I brought you a gift from the European land this time. It is said that it is a sword used by a famous Grand Duke in history books. I will ask someone to send it to you later. Thank you, Godfather. Li Dongqing bowed very seriously. Lin Yuxian waved his hand. Godfather, go to rest first. I will show you around when you are well. I will accompany you. Li Dongqing said softly. Lin Yuxian was stunned. Li Dongqing was very close to him when he was a child. Every time he came back, Li Dongqing would accompany him when he wanted to rest. But in fact, he was taken away by Dongqing Yu or the maid every time. Children were easy to coax, and Li Dongqing was very obedient, so he never made trouble. Dongqing, you haven't eaten yet, right? I will go first. Can you come to me later? Lin Yuxian chuckled softly. I have informed the kitchen. Dinner is early today. Godfather, wait for me for a few minutes. Li Dongqing turned and looked in another direction. The two servants each carried a food box and walked into the garden in a hurry. Lin Yuxian glanced at Lin Fengting awkwardly, hoping that he could help him out. Lin Fengting was about to say something, but he found that Li Dongqing was also looking at him. The child's eyes were very calm, without any emotion. Lin Fengting's mouth twitched. He sighed and said, Then let's go together. The young and beautiful maid put the food box on the table and took away the fruit plate. Li Dongqing opened the food box obediently and took out the food inside. It was a large bowl of rice with a strange luster. The rice was the best rice, but it was mixed with a lot of materials, with a kind of fragrance like medicinal herbs. There were 3 dishes and 1 soup, all of which were beautifully prepared. 1 dish was fried meat that was somewhat translucent, 2 dishes of unknown green vegetables, and a bowl of very clear soup that exuded an alluring aroma. Li Dongqing didn't greet Lin Yuxian and Lin Fengting. He ate alone in silence. He knew that his godfather didn't need to eat. And his master wouldn't eat these things either. He didn't dislike them, but he was afraid of wasting them. He once heard the people in the kitchen say in a very complicated tone that his young master, who was not surnamed Lin, was treated much better than any of the core members of the Lin clan. Not to mention other things, just the price of his meal could be compared to the annual expenses of an ordinary middle-class family in Europe. And he had 3 meals a day, almost all of which were set at a fixed time and had never missed a meal. Compared with the money he squandered crazily during his growth, resources were more important. Many of his food could hardly be seen on the market. Many of his things were even things that most people had never heard of. For some of them, the Lin clan had to trade or even rob them. Because of his existence, the Lin clan even specially formed a small army to do nothing else but to find suitable ingredients for his young master all over the world. Every bite of food he ate and even every drop of water he drank were unimaginable resources. The Lin clan had brought him back. In terms of training him, they had spared no expense. After eating these foods, they became the purest form of nutrition, transforming his body at every moment, making his body healthier, stronger, and more perfect. Such a seemingly simple meal, even Lin Fengting would feel that it was a bit extravagant and a waste to eat it. But he ate it every day. Li Dongqing ate seriously. He ate very seriously, as if he was facing a war. Lin Fengting smoked silently. Lin Yuxian, with a pale face, sat in a chair and watched Li Dongqing eat. His eyes were soft and soothing with an indescribable persistence. After the meal, Lin Yuxian took Li Dongqing's hand and walked to the bedroom where he rested. Dongqing, I'll tell you a secret, okay? In fact, I'm a weirdo who lives underground. I like quiet very much. Here, this is the password to enter the underground. You can also come up from below. If you don't like it, you can come up by yourself. Do you remember? I'm a heavy sleeper. I'm afraid I can't open the door for you. The elevator went down slowly. When the elevator door opened again, Li Dongqing saw a very large bedroom that was occupied by countless large equipment and looked extremely crowded. The air was filled with a somewhat pungent smell of disinfectant. Two medical elites of the Lin clan in white coats had just adjusted the instruments. When they saw Lin Yuxian come in with Li Dongqing, they were slightly stunned and subconsciously said, "Mr. Lin, young master." Lin Yuxian nodded. However, Li Dongqing did not respond. He just looked at everything around him silently. Lin Yuxian thought about it and said softly, "Well, you two work overtime and stay here with Dongqing. Dongqing wants to play here. After I fall asleep, if he wants to go up, you can take him up." His palm was pulled by someone. Lin Yuxian lowered his head and saw Li Dongqing's extremely clear eyes. "Godfather, I remember the password and the way. I won't disturb you. I can go up to eat by myself. Then I'll come down and rest with you." Lin Yuxian hesitated for a moment and said with a smile, "Okay." He waved to the two medical elites in front of him. After they left the bedroom, Lin Yuxian, who had some cold sweat on his face, said with a smile, "Good son, I'll take you to see my big bed." The two of them held each other's hands and came to a metal can that was almost completely sealed. The iron can was oval in shape. It contained a part of the blue liquid with a hint of black, which was almost solidified. Lin Yuxian pressed a button. The liquid in the hibernation chamber began to boil and turned into large pieces of blue foam. "Is it beautiful?" Lin Yuxian asked with a smile. The air began to fill with the bitter smell of countless drugs combined together. It was even more unpleasant when mixed with the disinfectant. Li Dongqing looked at the hibernation chamber in front of him and nodded seriously. "This is my big bed. I like to sleep in it the most." Lin Yuxian took a deep look at Li Dongqing and said with a smile, "I'll go to rest. If you're bored, you can go up or ask someone to send some toys. Don't worry. I sleep deeply and won't wake up." Li Dongqing nodded. Lin Yuxian took off his clothes and opened the hibernation chamber. The moment he took off his clothes, a body full of bruises appeared in front of Li Dongqing. Chest, back, thighs, arms. On Lin Yuxian's body, there were countless wounds crisscrossing, which looked like a very ferocious and strange pattern. There were some new wounds. The moment the bandages were removed, blood flowed from the wounds. Lin Yuxian, who was pale, gritted his teeth, but there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. In this way, he looked like a rag doll that had been torn up at will and violently sewn together. Li Dongqing was neither afraid nor excited. He just stood there and watched silently. Lin Yuxian slowly lay down in the hibernation chamber. Countless bubbles drowned his body. The potion seeped in along the wounds. The pain began to spread all over his body. Lin Yuxian gritted his teeth and looked at Li Dongqing. He chuckled and said in a trembling voice, "Then I'll rest." Li Dongqing quietly nodded his head. Lin Yuxian pressed a button and injected himself with a small amount of anesthetic. Then the hibernation chamber slowly closed. Countless bubbles with a bad smell covered him. The hibernation chamber made a soft sound. There seemed to be two worlds inside and outside the chamber. Only a 7-year-old child stood in front of the hibernation chamber and stood silently for a long time. His expression was as calm as ever. But his eyes were quietly red. "I promised your mother to give you a chance." In the somewhat dark study, Lin Fengting looked at the boy in front of him with soft eyes. In front of him was a small wooden sword and a few old but well-maintained notebooks. On the other side of these items, there was a jade pendant that was smooth and soft. The 12-year-old boy was already nearly 1.75 meters tall. His body proportions were amazing, and his face was beginning to change from that of a child to that of a teenager. It was as if he had inherited his mother's genes. His facial lines were extremely outstanding, and he already had a somewhat perfect appearance. He stared at the somewhat rough wooden sword and the notebooks that were basically stacked together. Lin Fengting also looked at him quietly. The wooden sword was left by Gu Xianyan. There were 3 in total. One was very small, one was very small, and the last one was the one in front of him. At that time, Gu Xianyan was already in a bad state of mind. She was even a little unconscious, but she still left her son a few toys that she made herself. Although the workmanship was poor, they were Li Dongqing's favorite when he was a child. Dongqing, it may be a little early, but I still want to say that it's time to choose your future direction. On the sofa in the corner, Lin Yuxian said softly. Lin Fengting glanced at his son, shook his head, and patted the wooden sword and the notebook. He said softly, "Your biological parents are very great people. No, in the eyes of the dark world, your father can even be said to be the most great person in hundreds of years. He represents a glorious era that belongs only to him. Although it is very short, it is very brilliant. Here is everything about your parents. Some of it is recorded by me, some by your mother, and some by your father. It is very detailed. It is everything from the beginning to the end of that era. These can be given to you, or you can refuse." Lin Fengting smiled. "You are their biological son, but at the same time, Dongqing, you are also a child of the Lin clan. So," he gently patted the jade pendant beside him. "This is the token of the patriarch of the Lin clan. It is also another choice for you. If you choose this jade pendant, I will officially announce that from today on, Li Dongqing is the heir of the Lin clan. I am old. After me, you will be the patriarch of the Lin clan. The martial arts of the Lin clan, all the resources of the Lin clan, and all the information will be open to you. After I die, you will take my place to guard the countless branches of the Lin clan. When you have nothing to do, you can travel around the world. You will be as rich as a country, free and unrestrained, and live a carefree life. These are all yours." He gently patted the wooden sword beside him. "If you choose this, what you get is actually just a story, the story of your biological parents. But you will also bear a lot of things, a lot of resentment, and a lot of hatred. These should be borne by you, but also should not be borne by you. Your future life will be completely different from now. I can't describe what kind of life it will be, but it will definitely be different from the life you choose this jade pendant for." Lin Fengting looked at Li Dongqing deeply. "Child, what do you choose?" "Master? Godfather? Actually," in a somewhat dark environment, Li Dongqing quietly looked at the wooden sword in front of him and whispered, "Actually, there is one thing you didn't tell me." Lin Fengting suddenly felt a little uneasy and worried. "That is?" Li Dongqing laughed. His eyes suddenly turned red. "I shouldn't have been born in the first place. You didn't tell me that the reason why I was able to be born smoothly was because my mother killed my biological father with her own hands." Lin Fengting and Lin Yuxian trembled at the same time. The two stared at the young man with red eyes in front of them. Li Dongqing lowered his head slightly and murmured, "I don't know why," he laughed self-deprecatingly. "I remember it all. I don't know why, but I really remember. I remember everything when I was a child, and I can feel that my mother seems to have really gone to a very, very far place." Chapter 1277. On the threshold where moonlight and light blended, the notebook turned the last page. The 16-year-old boy sat leaning against the door, looking up at the starlight in the night sky, lost in thought. The wooden sword and notebook lay beside him, making a soft sound when the wind blew. His master said it was a story, an extremely glorious era. It had been 4 years since he made the choice that night. He opened these notes for the first time tonight, not to accept the story. Instead, he wanted to finish the story in his memory. From a very young age, Li Dongqing had the most basic thinking and memory. He remembered that his mother made him feel at ease and warm. He remembered that she gently stroked the fingers in front of his eyes. He remembered what she looked like. He remembered that she wore a red dress and put on exquisite makeup for him. He remembered that she was in a trance when she handed him and his sister over to his master. He remembered the helplessness when his sister left all the best food she could find for him in the garbage dump. He remembered the complicated look in his master's eyes when he looked at him. He remembered his godfather's doting and his serious injuries and exhaustion every time he came back. He remembered that someone had talked about Lin and Xianxia State, Dongqing clan and Donghuang. He also remembered the stories his mother told him when he was born. Those stories became dreams as he grew up. In the dream, he was illusory. He looked at his father, who was a little vague when he was young, and his mother, who was very clear. He felt their sadness, joy, and resentment. In the dream, they met and died. Countless emotions surged in the depths of his heart since he was a child. He didn't know what to say, so most of the time, he was silent. Under the moonlight, with each page of the notebook turned, the image of his parents in his memory seemed to become more and more three-dimensional and clear. It was like a young couple with peerless beauty was standing on his left and right side. The joys and sorrows of separation and reunion came to him. Li Dongqing reached out and gently touched the wooden sword beside him, feeling the cool touch from the sword, and he became quieter and quieter. Light footsteps could be heard. Under the moonlight, Lin Fengting, whose hair was all white and wore a loose tang suit, slowly walked over, carrying a jar of good Huadiao wine in his hand. Li Dongqing looked up at him and whispered, "Master, I know you're in a bad mood. Do you want a drink?" Lin Fengting lifted the wine jar in his hand. "Shall we ask the kitchen to make a few dishes to go with the wine?" Li Dongqing glanced at the wine pot and shook his head. "Tea." In the hall, the two maids responsible for taking care of Li Dongqing looked at each other and turned to make tea. Lin Fengting did not care about anything and directly sat down beside Li Dongqing. There was a wooden sword between them. The cold moonlight shone on the courtyard garden, and the sky was hazy and blurry. The tea was served. Li Dongqing took the teacup and took a sip. The tea was strong and bitter. Lin Fengting glanced at him. "Did you read the notes? Is there nothing you want to say to me? Have you ever regretted it? I mean the choice back then. A few years ago, if you had chosen that jade pendant, you would be the young patriarch of the Lin clan now. You wouldn't have to consider anything, just like me. You could do whatever you want, and you wouldn't have to shoulder anything. Isn't that good? And now, a story let you carry a lot of things? Is it worth it? How like you? As a son, you have to do something for your parents, right? Want to avenge them? Are you confident?" In the indescribable depression, Lin Fengting took a deep look at his disciple. He took the wine jar, took 2 cups, and filled them with wine. Li Dongqing did not move, but gently touched the wooden sword in his hand. "The divine list has a new ranking." Lin Fengting picked up the wine glass and whispered, "Emperor Huao has reached the top of the divine list and ranks first." He took a sip of wine and laughed at himself. It's true that the Li family is good at making arrangements. The path of Emperor Huo is similar to that of the ancestors of our Lin clan. When Li Guangtu pulled out his dragon vein from him, Senior Li should have nodded. Huo had half of the vitality of the dragon vein of Xianxia State and entered the peak of the invincible realm. From then on, they should have had a plan. After your father died, the dragon veins attracted each other, and Emperor Huo filled up his own dragon vein. These years, he has completely recovered from the injury in his body, successfully broke through the peak of the invincible realm, and entered a new realm. At present, his realm is not as good as that of your father and Wang Tianzong. But now, he is the only one in this realm, so in this era, he can almost be called the chosen one. Today's Li family is really invincible in the world. He drank up the glass of wine. Lin Fengting sighed softly, feeling a little emotional. Li Dongqing slowly reached out, picked up the teacup, and took another sip of tea. After a long while, he nodded. The soft light of the crystal chandelier filled every corner of the hall of the ancient castle. 2 rows of medieval-style armors were neatly arranged in the hall. The huge screen was playing the news of East Island's Emperor Huo's official visit to Italos. In front of the tea table, which was carved with complex patterns and could be called a work of art, a middle-aged man in his 40s, who was full of vigor, picked up the glass and said softly, "Brother, I'd like to propose a toast to you." Lin Yuxian picked up the glass, clinked it with him, and drank up the wine in the glass. The Lin clan has developed well in recent years. The middle-aged man, who had an ordinary appearance but an extraordinary aura, smiled and said, "Brother, your branch in particular has developed a little frighteningly in the past few years. You're blossoming everywhere. You can even say that you're a superpower now." Lin Yuxian held the glass and looked at him with a faint smile. "Why do you want it?" "Brother, what are you talking about?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "I'm greedy, but I won't rob the elders of the Lin clan. What I want to say is that Big Brother and I are a family, and we don't have to be separated. When we develop together, there's no need to worry about anything. Big Brother, you're doing well in Europe and Africa, but I haven't seen your flag in my territory. If you are interested, how about I invite you to develop in East Island of Zhongzhou State? The subcontinent is big, but I think I'm important enough. To be honest, there are not many people who don't respect me. Brother, if you come in, no one dares to say anything." "Huh?" Lin Yuxian took a deep breath and said blandly, "The subcontinent is really big, but the market has long been saturated. How can I get involved?" "If you want to, of course, there is." The middle-aged man said seriously, "If the Lin clan's industry wants to come in, I will naturally fully support it. If you want to get involved in many fields in Zhongzhou State, the parliament will be more than happy. Even if you think it's troublesome, it doesn't matter. I have a good relationship with the royal family of Semitic, so you can get in directly. It doesn't matter even if you have to take my share. Our families have been friends for so many years. It's too boring to care about interests." Lin Yuxian glanced at him and seemed to be a little surprised. The Semitic people had an extraordinary position in the world because they controlled the energy, oil. Semitic also had the largest oil reserves in the world. If Lin Yuxian got involved, the benefits he would get would make even the super forces crazy with jealousy. At present, most of the benefits in this area were controlled by the good brother in front of him. Lin Yuxian suddenly laughed. "You know better than me that the things in my hands don't belong to the Lin clan. I'm not even a branch of the Lin clan now. If you want to cooperate, you can talk to the Lin clan. But it doesn't feel right to talk to me, a person who has no status in the Lin clan. Everything in my hands has nothing to do with the Lin clan. As for myself..." He shook his head. "The oil in the subcontinent is too rich. I'm afraid I'll have indigestion." The middle-aged man was silent for a long time. When it was quiet, his silence showed that he was in a somewhat sluggish state. His entire person carried an indescribable feeling of emptiness. Lin Yuxian remained calm, drinking and eating in silence. "I don't regard you as an outsider. Why do you keep me 1,000 miles away? Do you know how much information about you have been squeezed out from me over the years? You and I have had several conflicts, but I have suppressed them and tolerated you everywhere. Because I have always felt that you and I are a real family. Uncle Lin is also here. If I reach out everywhere, it means that I'm not sensible, impolite, and disrespectful to the elders. I don't regard you and the Lin clan as outsiders. You treat me like this, which makes me feel a little wronged." Lin Yuxian shook his head and said flatly, "I have nothing to do with the Lin clan. In life, many things can be changed, and many relationships can be changed. But how can bloodline be changed? You are the heir of the Lin clan. In my eyes, everything you have naturally belongs to the Lin clan." The middle-aged man looked at Lin Yuxian with burning eyes. "Bloodline? This has always been the obsession of your family. I can't agree with it." There was a little ridicule in Lin Yuxian's tone. The middle-aged man drank a glass of wine and said in a low voice, "If you are not satisfied with Summit, you can make any other requests. As long as you say it, I will agree to all of them." He thought that Lin Yuxian was advancing by retreating and wanted to increase the price. Lin Yuxian took a deep look at him and suddenly said, "Why don't you tell me what you want? I want to ask you for a person." The middle-aged man spoke bluntly. Lin Yuxian's pupils shrank suddenly. The silence formed a stalemate. The surrounding atmosphere became dignified and austere invisibly. "I thought you wanted two." Lin Yuxian sneered. "One is enough." The middle-aged man whispered, "Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. If he doesn't die, I can't feel at ease." "There is nothing to talk about." Lin Yuxian shook his head. "I can't afford what you want. Your Majesty, you don't have to call me brother. I can't afford this title either. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes, and his voice was still calm with almost full sincerity. Why are you so straightforward, brother? I come here sincerely this time and don't say any more. Lin Yoxian's voice was calm. If you continue, I will see you out. The middle-aged man's voice stopped. The lingering sound of his unfinished words suddenly became incomparably hoarse. Lin Yuxian lowered his head to eat and said calmly, "Have a safe trip. I won't see you out." Ha! The middle-aged man stood up. The bright yellow dragon robe, the 12 movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars of East Island. As the middle-aged man got up, he appeared in the hall in a complicated and gorgeous costume. Lin Yuxian did not raise his head. "I'm kind and sincere. Why are you so heartless, brother? The Li family and the Lin clan have been friends for hundreds of years. You and I are one family. Everything in the past is still vivid in my mind. Brother, do you really have the heart to see us become enemies because of a bastard?" His voice was still calm, but a strong sense of majesty and oppression arose spontaneously between the lines. Lin Yuxian slowly raised his head and looked at the man in front of him. He was the current patriarch of the Li family, the leader of the dark world of Zhongzhou State, the dominator of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, the first on the world divine list, the celestial emperor of East Island, and the supreme will of the subcontinent. Since his sister-in-law died in Beihai more than a decade ago, there was no one in the dark world who could balance him. With the strength at the peak of the invincible realm, he returned to East Island with the purgatory of Heaven Capital, which had suffered heavy losses. The subcontinent had been full of turbulence and bloodshed for many years. Gaoshan, Annan, Heng State, the will of the celestial emperor of Huao wreaked havoc in the subcontinent. Then Zhongzhou State. Then Beihai, which had not yet recovered. For more than a decade, the dark world of the subcontinent had not been completely unified, but the purgatory of Heaven Capital and the Li family had suppressed all the resistance. Now they were slowly digesting the fruits of victory. In 10 years, at most 20 years, if everything went well, the Li family and the purgatory of Heaven Capital would become the only dynasty in the subcontinent. The Wang family of Beihai and the super-wealthy families would die slowly under the soft knife of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. And they didn't even have the slightest way to resist. The celestial emperor of Huao, who had established the general situation of the subcontinent not long ago, did not stop. Instead, he took advantage of his ascension to the first on the divine list to officially expand. The European land was their first stop. The celestial emperor of Huao officially visited Italos. 2 days later, he would officially visit the Holy Land and meet the old man. The Holy Land and the purgatory of Heaven Capital were deeply cooperating. In today's European land, the Shadow Throne, Rothschild, the wealthy families, and the Dark Knights were all facing a formidable enemy. Similarly, Lin Yuxian was also facing a formidable enemy. The whole dark world was a little uneasy, because in this era, there was really no one who could stop the celestial emperor of Huao. How good it would have been if you had done this earlier. Lin Yuxian said blandly, "Brother, you are uncomfortable and so am I. In my eyes, you are the most normal person. I am being sincere." The celestial emperor of Huao shook his head slightly. "In my heart, the Lin clan is really not an outsider, neither is my brother. What I want is that bastard. He is 16 this year, right? I don't want to wait anymore. What do you and the Lin clan want? Just say it. As long as I have it, I can give it to you. But you have to give that bastard to me." "Are you going to kill him?" Lin Yoxian's voice was cold. "Kill my adopted son? Not kill." The celestial emperor of Huao shook his head. "Not just kill. That crazy woman killed my father. After that, I couldn't even find my father's bones. I could only set up a cenotaph. I'll take that bastard back and tear every part of him in front of my father's cenotaph bit by bit. I'll let him die slowly and hope that his screams will be louder at that time. I also hope that the crazy bitch hasn't gone far and can listen to his son's screams. I'll let him know that he and Li Tianlan are completely cut off and have no descendants." Lin Yuxian said word by word, "That's my adopted son." So, the surrounding temperature continued to drop. The celestial emperor of Huawu's voice became gloomy. Brother, are you going to stop me from killing that bastard? Lin Yuxian did not speak. The celestial emperor of Huawu continued, can you stop me? After I cooperate with the Holy Land, who can stop me? The badly damaged Rothschild? The Shadow Throne that is in disarray? The Dark Knights? Who do they think they are? He did not go on. But Lin Yuxian understood what he meant. The Shadow Throne of Rothschild was nothing. Most of his roots were in the European continent. In the eyes of the celestial emperor of Hu, he was naturally nothing. You can try. Lin Yuxian said lightly. Brother, you are no match for me. I don't want to fight with the Lin clan. The Lin clan has been with the Li family for hundreds of years. The Lin clan can ignore a bastard, but I still care. Lin Yuxian just sneered. No one would believe this kind of nonsense to deceive a child. His style of doing things for so many years had clearly shown that he would not let go of the Lin clan. He dared to give so much to the Lin clan because he was confident that he could swallow the entire Lin clan in the future. In this case, what did it matter if he gave more? Brother, you seem to be dissatisfied with my Li family. You know very well how your Li family rose to the top. Lin Yuxian said lightly. Do you mean the Dongqing clan in those days? The celestial emperor of Huawu said softly, I know that, and I plan to compensate them. Compensate? Lin Yuxian mocked. If I remember correctly, you want to kill the only descendant of the Dongqing clan, right? Who said he is the only one? The celestial emperor of Huawu said lightly, when I came to Daoist, I saw the Xiao who studied with you. She was a very young beauty with a slim figure and an elegant manner. She was very good. What do you want? Lin Yuxian's face suddenly changed. I will take her away and accept her. The celestial emperor of Huawu said lightly, I want her to give birth to a son for me. In the future, let me and her son inherit the Li family. How about that? Lin Yuxian suddenly stood up and rushed to the door without saying a word. Brother, you are impulsive. The voice of the celestial emperor of Huawu floated. Lin Yuxian suddenly turned back. In his line of sight, an incomparably brilliant sword light suddenly lit up. Sister? Godfather? The slender teenager rushed into Lin Yuxian's exclusive bedroom in the underground. In some crowded space, countless mechanical equipment was working hard, making a buzzing sound. Dong Qingyu, who wore a long white dress and had long hair, sat on a chair in a daze. Her big eyes were red and swollen, as if she had just cried. Seeing the teenager rush in, she forced a smile and whispered, Dongqing, Godfather went in? Li Dongqing held his sister's cold palm, skillfully operated the medical equipment on the side, and transferred the situation in the hibernation chamber. A somewhat illusory figure appeared on the screen. Countless body data flashed beside the illusory figure. Li Dongqing did not look at the data. His eyes were fixed on the humanoid illusory figure representing his godfather on the screen. The illusory figure shook slightly. In his sight, Li Dongqing could clearly see that the illusory figure representing his godfather was missing an arm. The celestial emperor of Huawu came to the European continent. Lin Fengting's figure came over. The corner of Li Dongqing's mouth moved, and he whispered, Godfather, the injury is very serious. Lin Fengting whispered, the loss of an arm has some impact on his strength, but it's worth it. The other party wanted to take Ye. If Yuxian didn't fight desperately, neither of them would come back this time. Now, at least he came back. It's good that he came back. Take my sister? Li Dongqing's voice was in a trance. An old cow eats young grass. He wants Ye to give him a son to inherit the Li family. Lin Fengting laughed, but don't worry. Ye will stay at home in the future. I'm not dead yet. No matter how crazy Huawu is, he won't behave atrociously here. Li Dongqing was completely silent. Even the sound of breathing was completely restrained. He stared deeply at the illusory figure with one arm missing on the screen. Endless depression continued to spread with him as the center. Do you still want revenge? Lin Fengting asked. Yes. It was a simple answer. Plain and light. Do you know what you're going to face? Lin Fengting's voice was gentle. He's the strongest person in this world and this era. He's really invincible and also the strongest superpower in this era. It's not easy to take revenge. It's really not easy. What are you going to do? There was silence. After a long silence, Li Dongcheng looked at his godfather who was sleeping in the hibernation cabin. Yes. I want to go out for a walk. Li Dongcheng's voice was soft. Look at the world and see how invincible it is. Lin Fengting nodded. When you officially enter the qi-controlling realm, you can go out and have a look. 16 years old. Qi-controlling realm. Li Dongcheng, who had no bottlenecks in his body and will, began to formally contact martial arts at the age of 12. His foundation was unimaginably solid. But in the past 4 years, he didn't even enter the qi-controlling realm, the most basic of the 4 realms of martial arts. It didn't make sense at all. Lin Fengting didn't know what was going on. Is the qi-controlling realm enough? Li Dongcheng asked. Lin Fengting didn't answer but asked, do you know what your godfather has been doing all these years? Li Dongcheng shook his head. He is taking care of some of the properties left by your parents. Lin Fengting said slowly, when they were alive, that was their era. After your father died, Emperor Dong's palace fell apart, and the remaining properties were less than 1/10. What your godfather has done these years is to gather up some of the things that were barely left. After so many years of development, what he has now, although it is less than 1/10 of what Emperor Dong's palace used to be, it can be regarded as a relatively objective foundation. And this foundation was originally taken care of by him on behalf of your parents, and he wanted to hand it over to you. This time when the Emperor of Huawu comes to the European continent, your foundation will probably shrink a lot, but there are still a few people left by your parents, and there is no doubt that they are loyal. I will give you their contact information. If you want to go out, they should be able to protect your safety as long as the Emperor of Huawu doesn't take action personally. But you also have to give them hope. A 16-year-old in the qi-controlling realm, in the outside world, people who don't know the secret of your body will not be too disappointed. But if you leave the Lin clan and haven't officially stepped into the 4 realms of martial arts, what do you think they will think? Li Dongcheng was silent for a long time before he whispered, the hope I give them should not be so cheap. Lin Fengting glanced at him. Li Dongcheng slowly reached out his hand. An extremely condensed sword energy slowly formed at his fingertips. The sword energy twisted and shone in his hand. In the narrow space, there was a sudden burst of ear-piercing explosions. Li Dongcheng's aura began to rise sharply. The sword energy began to contain a storm. The storm changed and instantly turned into frost. The frost began to burn fiercely in the silence. The fire was extremely dazzling. The thunder roared. The electric arc flashed. Li Dongcheng's aura instantly reached the peak. That deep blue electric arc danced in his hand, incomparably enchanting. In an instant, Li Dongcheng went straight into the half-step invincible realm. He looked at Lin Fengting and whispered, this should be enough. Chapter 1278. The light flickered. The soft light wasn't radiating. Instead, it was like water ripples, spreading layer by layer in the place where it first lit up. The darkness in the room was gradually dispelled by the gradually spreading light. The light increased and became softer. The 4 walls gradually became clear in his line of sight. A tall and slender young man dressed in white walked forward quietly. The light spread to the entire room. All the light was absorbed by the walls around him. On the walls, strings of characters were engraved neatly and meticulously. They were in different languages, but they weren't messy at all. Instead, they had a beautiful sense of harmony. They were Hebrew and Latin. The 2 languages engraved neatly on the walls seemed to be telling a story one after another. As the light gathered, every character in the room was shimmering with a faint light, mysterious and sacred. The young man walked to the center of the room. His eyes slowly moved along the Hebrew on the wall and moved to the Latin area. He saw the blurry and sacred murals behind the 2 prophecies. He saw the golden holy sword and olive branch placed in the center of the room. Below the sword and the olive branch, an old man in a white robe smiled quietly and looked at him with a gentle gaze. An old man that was hard to describe with specific words. The white robe seemed to be just a symbol of him. His face was clear and blurry, and people would instantly forget it after seeing it. He sat there quietly, but vaguely, he gave people a feeling that he was completely out of the scope of a human. He had become a spirit. A pure spirit that contained many emotions. Deep, quiet, serene, peaceful. Majestic, joyful, gentle, compassionate. All kinds of emotions kept alternating in his eyes, turning into a gentle but irresistible spiritual storm that kept spreading in different directions. The young man in white looked at him and bowed slightly. The old man smiled in satisfaction, and his voice was filled with joy. "Sit down, child." The young man nodded and sat opposite the old man. The words on the wall still reflected the mysterious light. In the shining light, the young man's blurry figure suddenly began to become three-dimensional and clear. The old man stared deeply at the young man in white before him. He wasn't handsome, he wasn't feminine, he wasn't tough. If he had to use a word to describe him, the young man in front of him was perfect. His appearance, his body, his temperament, his every move, if taken apart, might not be considered outstanding, but when all of these were combined together, it gave people a feeling of perfection. This kind of perfection seemed to emit a bright light, completely and unobtrusively covering his thoughts and his various emotions. This feeling reminded the old man of the child's mother. His eyes flickered even more, and the invisible spiritual storm that was hidden also began to surge violently. The young man sat quietly and did not speak for a while. The old man did not speak either. Time passed in silence for nearly 2 minutes. Footsteps came from outside the room again. 2 men, one big and one small, walked in one after another. The white-robed old man smiled and said softly, "Child, let me introduce you." "Excuse me." He pointed at the man who walked in first and said slowly, "This is St. Thomas." He did not mention the other party's specific position, nor did he need to. In this place, those who could add the word saint in front of their names were important figures who had been spiritually crowned by the Saint Emperor of the sanctuary. And in this era of the sanctuary, only St. Thomas had been crowned by the Saint Emperor. The young man slowly turned his head, glanced at Thomas, and nodded slightly. "This one." The old man pointed at the figure next to Thomas. Compared with Thomas, who was burly and strong like a human-shaped violent bear, standing next to him was an Oriental man. He had a standard face from the continent, was thin, and had an easygoing and elegant temperament. When the old man pointed at him, he was also looking at the motionless young man sitting in the seat with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. "You should be familiar with this one." The old man's smile was very warm. "He is a famous painter in the dark world, a calligrapher, and one of the 3 invincible realm experts in the purgatory of Heaven Capital. He is about to join our sanctuary and take charge of the Knights Templar for us." The young man raised his head again as the old man spoke. His eyes fell on the Oriental man who was about to join the sanctuary and take charge of the Knights Templar. The old man's voice continued, "From tomorrow on, he will become the center of the dark world. His existence represents the intimacy between the purgatory of Heaven Capital and the sanctuary. We will be allies forever and welcome the era that belongs to us together." The old man's tone was getting higher and higher. "Let me formally introduce him to you. This is the collector, child. To be honest, he is your father's uncle and used to be your father's right-hand man, Li Huazhang." The young man's eyes were completely calm, like a deep pool. Li Huazhang. Of course, he was no stranger to the name. His godfather gnashed his teeth every time he mentioned it. The predecessor of the purgatory of Heaven Capital was the Li family of Zhongzhou State. His father was from the Li family, and Li Huazhang was a direct descendant of the Li family. Li Huazhang's martial arts talent was not good. It could be said that Emperor Dong's palace had made great efforts to break through and become an invincible realm expert. At the beginning, when Emperor Dong's palace and the purgatory of Heaven Capital fought for the orthodox position of the Li family, Li Huazhang was in the purgatory of Heaven Capital, but he did not agree with the idea of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, so he went to Emperor Dong's palace. When Dong Huang was alive, he trusted him greatly. At that time, he could be said to be Dong Huang's right-hand man, loyal and devoted. After the fall of Emperor Dong and the destruction of Emperor Dong's palace, the purgatory of heaven capital devoured the flesh and blood of Emperor Dong's palace as quickly as possible, and Li Huazhang joined the purgatory of heaven capital again. Moreover, he was also put in an important position. Now that he had joined the sanctuary and was about to take charge of the holy hall in the sanctuary, it was said to be a symbol of friendship between the purgatory of heaven capital and the sanctuary. It was like a mascot, but everyone knew the actual meaning. That was the deal. It was a deal between the sanctuary and the purgatory of heaven capital. The sanctuary had handed over the framework and countless elites of the quasi-super force of Knights Templars in this transaction, and the purgatory of heaven capital would inevitably pay something of the same value. Li Huazhang's appearance in the European continent at this time meant that from now on, everything in the purgatory of heaven capital in the European continent would be decided by Li Huazhang. This kind of status could be said to be below only one person and above tens of thousands. Why could Li Huazhang be valued in both the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace? The young man actually understood. In the eyes of outsiders, Li Huazhang was repeatedly jumping sideways. But the most fundamental reason was the shackles in the depths of his soul, the Li family. Whether it was Emperor Dong's palace or the purgatory of heaven capital, they all belonged to the Li family. Li Huazhang's position had never changed. He just did it for the Li family, and he had a clear conscience about the Li family. The young man really understood this kind of mentality. So he bowed slightly to Li Huazhang, who was no longer young or even middle-aged, and said in a calm voice, "Little grandpa." According to seniority, Li Huazhang was indeed the young man's little grandpa. The look in Li Huazhang's eyes became more and more complicated. He nodded with some relief and excitement in his eyes. The young man fell silent again and stopped talking. Time passed slowly. The old man in white looked at him with gentle eyes and said with a smile, "Child, what do you want to say when you want to see us?" They all knew the identity of the young man in front of them. A few days ago, Emperor Huawu came to the European continent in person. Lin Yuxian of the Lin clan, who was already at the peak of the invincible realm, had an arm cut off. While everyone was waiting for the Lin clan's reaction and counterattack, the young man in front of them, who had been living in many people's rumors, walked out of the Lin clan for the first time. He was the son of Dong Huang and that demoness. For more than 10 years, the shadow that the couple left on the whole dark world was far from completely dissipating. Their son entered the secular world for the first time, and the whole dark world focused on him. But no one expected that the young man came to the Holy Land at this time and asked to see the Saint Emperor of the Holy Land. This was His Majesty Saint Emperor, who held the faith of more than 1 billion people in the world. It was reasonable for the Saint Emperor to refuse this meeting. Even if the young man's parents had died, the identity of the young man, since he came to the gate of the Holy Emperor Palace, was worthy of the Saint Emperor meeting him in person. However, although the Saint Emperor agreed to meet, he also sent a message to Emperor Huawu, who had gone to Germany yesterday. The elites of the purgatory of heaven capital should have arrived outside the Holy Emperor Palace at this time. And Emperor Huawu should be on his way back at this time. The Saint Emperor in a white robe looked at the calm child in front of him playfully. He didn't know whether the child knew his situation or not. Why did he come here to look for him? It couldn't be to persuade him to give up the cooperation with the purgatory of heaven capital and then become the enemy of Emperor Hu, could it? If that was the case, then it would be too naive. I want to repent. The young man sat on the sofa. In the soft light, surrounded by countless Latin and Hebrew words, his voice was soft and sincere. I am guilty. The Saint Emperor, Saint Thomas, Li Huazhang. The air was eerily silent. There were churches and believers all over the world in the Holy Land. There were priests and countless people repenting every day. But there were really not many people in the world who were qualified to let the Saint Emperor personally listen to their confession. And now, this young man with a special identity. This young man who attracted the attention of the dark world. He wanted to repent? The Saint Emperor's eyes were a little dazed. For a moment, he didn't understand what was going on. He was a little dazed and a little excited that he didn't realize. He opened his mouth and almost instinctively said, "Child, what do you want to repent for?" His voice was low and softer. The young man was still sitting, without any movement or kneeling down. He just said softly, "I have committed the crime of cowardice. I have an enemy that I have no way of defeating at the moment. My parents and family all died because of him. My current family member, the person I respect the most, had an arm cut off by him. I want revenge, but I'm a little confused. Your Majesty, what should I do?" The Saint Emperor, "I have also committed the crime of rage. Because my enemy has found an ally that I also have no way of defeating. They are very close to me and I am very close to them now. I am angry at their alliance and cooperation. I want to destroy their alliance this time. Your Majesty, what should I do?" The Saint Emperor, the youth continued to speak calmly. He was clearly repenting, but between the lines, there was a chilling calmness that sent chills down one's spine. The light in the room flickered. In places where the light did not shine, extreme coldness began to silently bare its fangs and claws in the dark. "I am also guilty of jealousy. Because of my enemy, everything he had should have belonged to me. But they worked together to take it away from me. I don't think that's fair. I want to do many things, but because of jealousy, I'll commit even more crimes. Your Majesty, what should I do?" Under the cloak of darkness, cruelty began to show its edge. "I've also committed the sin of arrogance. I have an enemy. I'm not his match, but I still look down on him. I think he doesn't deserve all of this. Those things are all mine. As long as I have time, I'll take them all back. Everything that happened in the past will not end. I will grasp everything in my hands again. This is greed. Child, greed is a sin." The sage emperor finally spoke. The youth lowered his head and said softly, "I'm guilty." Waves after waves of mental storms slowly gathered towards the young man. The sage emperor's eyes began to shine. He was quietly altering the youth's consciousness. At that time, whether it was turning him into a devout believer, or whether it was to hand him over to the purgatory of heaven capital, this was something that had to be done. The light in the room began to distort under the mental power of the transcendent state. The mental power that could even affect the chosen one began to spread wantonly. The corners of the sage emperor's mouth rose slightly, gentle and kind. "Pray, child. Let God see your piety. I will also pray for you. As long as you repent sincerely, God will forgive your mistakes." He stood up, walked over to the youth, took his hand and said with a smile, "Come with me to the confessional. Let's pray together. Your sins will be purified and you will be forgiven." The youth stood up and looked into the sage emperor's eyes. His voice was a little confused, almost like he was talking in his sleep. "God will not forgive me." The sage emperor was stunned. The youth's voice continued, "But I have found a way to solve the problem." The sage emperor laughed, not at all nervous. His mental power had already invaded the child's brain. Even if he really had a way, it would not be a solution if he said it now. "I can't destroy my enemy for the time being." The youth said softly, "But I can weaken him." He looked into the sage emperor's eyes. "For example, I can first get rid of his partners and make him lose his allies in the European continent. That way, I can better protect some things." "Get rid of his partners." The sage emperor narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Child, you have sinned. You should kneel and pray sincerely. Please forgive me for my arrogance." "Your Majesty," the youth said softly, "I have sinned, but I can't see." As if he was mumbling to himself, the cruelty and savagery in the darkness broke through in an instant. The youth's voice continued, "If your Majesty can see, why don't you go to heaven for me and see what other sins I have committed?" A sense of unease and coldness that shouldn't have appeared arose from the depths of the sage emperor's heart. He frowned slightly. The youth released the sage emperor's hand. He took a step to the left. The air instantly twisted. An incomparably powerful mental storm swept over. But the youth's figure did not pause. He took a step to the left. The youth's hand reached into the void and clenched tightly. Beside him, The Sage Emperor's figure instantly shattered. The youth's tightly clenched hand directly pulled out a new Sage Emperor from the void. The light and darkness completely dissipated. The piece was completely shattered. The moment the Sage Emperor's true body was grabbed, the surrounding environment created by mental energy completely disappeared. Only the sacred sword and olive branch in the center of the room remained, dignified and calm. The Sage Emperor's eyes and expression froze. He was confused. He didn't expect the child to be unaffected by his mental energy and even see through the location of his true body. How did you? He wanted to ask the child how he did it. In his line of sight was still that youthful face of 16 years old. Calm, and indifferent. This seemingly well-behaved child did not intend to answer his question at all. He didn't want the Sage Emperor to ask his own question either. The moment he confirmed the Sage Emperor's true body, he tilted his head. The dark blue lightning that had been condensed to the extreme turned into an incomparably pure sword energy. The sword energy blossomed from his hand. Light and blood splattered at the same time. One of the Sage Emperor's arms left his body. He took a step forward. Under the intense pain, the Sage Emperor, who felt the real danger, completely focused his mind. His mouth opened, and his pupils contracted slightly. Boom! The mental energy that pervaded the entire Holy Emperor Palace vibrated and burst out like a substance. This was the peak power of the transcendent realm. This kind of power didn't have real lethality, but it could easily affect the real chosen one, the current emperor of Huawu, and make the experts at the peak of the invincible realm completely lost and unable to find his direction. The Sage Emperor didn't know martial arts, but no matter who he faced, he was innately invincible. The vast mental energy was boiling fiercely. The Sage Emperor looked at the youth in front of him and laughed. His eyes were clear and calm, without any ripples, like an abyss. When you stared into the abyss stared back at you. The youth, who was surrounded by sword light, took a step forward. The sword light gathered. The power pervaded. The sharpness shone. The youth raised his palm and waved it in front of the Sage Emperor. It was an understatement. He lifted something heavy as if it were light. The Sage Emperor, who was desperately releasing his mental energy, flew up. He was infinitely close to the crystal chandelier on the ceiling. The magnificent Holy Emperor Palace began to tumble and hang upside down in front of him. Warm blood flowed out. The moment the darkness fell, the ferocity and sharpness intertwined. The Sage Emperor saw his headless body. Blood gushed out of the Sage Emperor's body and spilled on the youth's white clothes. The red became the most dazzling color in the dark world. Too fast. There was not the slightest bit of delay. It was so straightforward that it was unbelievable. Until the Sage Emperor's head was in the youth's hand again. Then, St. Thomas's furious and miserable howl suddenly sounded. The Sage Emperor. Was he killed? An unparalleled sense of absurdity and confusion hit his mind. It was like a joke that wasn't funny at all. But the joke actually happened. The Sage Emperor, who stood at the peak of the world, was easily beheaded by a child who could ignore all mental energy. When this happened, he, the killing angel of the Holy Land, didn't even have a second to react. Thomas's howl was distorted to the extreme. The rolling sound waves surged under the night sky of the Holy Emperor Palace. The huge and pure power was completely boiling. The power belonging to the peak of the invincible realm was all condensed in his hands. He raised his hands. The mental storm before the Sage Emperor's death was still spreading. The youth grabbed the Sage Emperor's head and took a step toward Thomas. In the next second, the surging mental storm completely drowned the killing angel, who was second only to one person in the Holy Land and above thousands of people. Thomas's figure suddenly froze on the spot. The explosive power gathered in his hands directly exploded in front of him at the moment when he was in a trance. Blood flew everywhere. Visible cracks appeared on Thomas's body one after another. The power and domain that kept boiling and exploding around him were still raging. Li Huazhong, who was covered in sword light, was directly swept away and fell hard to the ground. Blood flowed out of his mouth like boiled water. A little power hit the youth who was covered in blood. This force easily tore apart the sword light on his body. The youth's face was pale, but he didn't stop at all and kept moving forward. The sage emperor was dead. The mental storm before his death only lasted for a few seconds before it began to dissipate quickly. Thomas, who was full of cracks all over his body, kept trembling. He stared at the approaching youth almost crazily and gnashed his teeth. "Please, don't. City. Li Dongqing. How dare you?" The youth blinked his eyes. The sword light shone. The killing angel of the Holy Land. An expert at the peak of the invincible realm who ranked fourth on the world divine list. St. Thomas's head flew directly into the sky, and blood gushed out. It was as neat and tidy. A transcendent realm expert. A peak of the invincible realm expert. An invincible realm expert. The combination that should have had the strength to kill the youth in seconds, but because of an accident, the two of them died in an instant. No one could have thought that Li Dongqing could ignore the mental power of the transcendent realm expert. How strong was his will? This was something that no one dared to think about. Li Dongqing grabbed Thomas's head and came to Li Huazhong. Li Huazhong was covered in blood, and his aura was extremely weak. He saw Li Dongqing coming over and shook his head with a bitter smile. "Little grandpa, are you okay?" Li Dongqing helped him up and said softly, "You shouldn't have killed them." In the slight and dull sound, Li Huazhong suddenly opened his eyes wide. He lowered his head in disbelief. In his sight, Li Dongqing was still holding him with one hand, and the other hand had let go of Saint Emperor and Thomas's heads. His 5 fingers directly stabbed into his abdomen. Li Dongqing's voice was still calm. "It's okay. I came here today to kill them. Without them, the Holy Land will be leaderless. It will either fall apart or fall into internal strife. The purgatory of Heaven Capital will lose its partners in Europe, and its influence will decline. Even if the Emperor of Huawu wants to continue to attack me, I will not become the main target of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. With so many benefits left by the Holy Land, even if the purgatory of Heaven Capital can stabilize, the other forces in Europe can't. If the purgatory of Heaven Capital wants to march into Europe, it will inevitably cause fierce resistance from all the forces in Europe. Without allies, they can only be in a stalemate with the major forces in Europe." He reached out and clenched, pulling out Li Huazhong's intestines. In the dripping blood, the pungent smell of blood permeated the air. Li Huazhong's eyes turned white. The vitality of the invincible realm would not let him die, and the will of the invincible realm would not make him faint. The severe pain made him grab Li Huazhong's shoulder tightly and tremble constantly. There are so many forces in Europe, and the Holy Land is leaderless. Compared with them, we are already hard bones. My godfather is not dead, and my master is also here. Even if Li Huawu wants to deal with me, he has to clean up the other forces in Europe first. He won't choose us, the most powerful one. In this way, I can further integrate the foundation left by my parents. Little grandpa, don't you think so? Puff! An extremely exquisite dagger slipped out of Li Dongqing's sleeve. Li Dongqing directly stabbed Li Huazhong's thigh. Li Huazhong screamed painfully and powerlessly. Cold sweat oozed from his forehead. His face was pale and his trembling became more obvious. "You want to kill me, Li family, I know." Li Dongqing nodded and whispered, "I know, little grandpa, I really understand. You did it for the Li family. From the purgatory of Heaven Capital to Emperor Dong's palace, from Emperor Dong's palace to the purgatory of Heaven Capital, everyone understands and understands you. I also understand you. I really can understand you. For the Li family I understand." The dagger began to slide. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. The tendons of the thigh were directly cut by the blade of the dagger. Blood kept flowing. Li Dongqing, who was doing all this slowly, did not have the slightest change in his eyes. He was as calm as water. "But what does this have to do with me? What does the Li family have to do with me?" "It does. Emperor Huo. Purgatory of Heaven Capital. We have a grudge. How can I forget? Little grandpa, we have to settle the blood feud slowly. Thomas and Saint Emperor are actually good people. You see, I killed Saint Emperor, and Saint Emperor affected Thomas with his own spiritual power. Thomas injured himself and then you. Isn't the situation beautiful now? Li Dongqing said seriously, they are all good people, so I let them die without pain. Li Dongqing muttered to himself, but the Li family is different, the Li family is really different. A great fear occupied all of Li Huazhang's consciousness. His eyes were even a little dazed, with a kind of regret. Li Dongqing didn't want to know what he regretted. The dagger was pulled out and fell again. This was the first time Li Dongqing had killed someone. He killed Saint Emperor of the Transcendent Realm. He killed Thomas, the killing angel. He was killing Li Huazhang. His palm did not tremble at all. He kept waving the dagger in his hand, destroying every intact corner of Li Huazhang's body. Pieces of flesh and blood kept splashing. Li Dongqing didn't know when Li Huazhang died. When he felt that everything was satisfactory, only Saint Emperor and Thomas's headless body were left in the room. And Li Huazhang's head. Li Dongqing, whose white clothes were completely dyed red with blood, stood up, picked up Li Dongqing's head, and walked out of the door. Inside the Holy Emperor Palace, a large number of holy knights and elites of the Purgatory of Heaven capital who realized that something was wrong had rushed in. Li Dongqing stood in front of the door, watching the crowd approaching, and suddenly threw out Li Huazhang's head in his hand. When the head flew in the air, the sword energy exploded from the inside of the head. Flesh and blood were everywhere. Li Dongqing laughed and said, "Eat watermelon, sweet." Your Majesty, Wutong Group has completed the acquisition of Xianxia Group. Lin Yuxian will be expelled from the board of directors of Xianxia Group in the near future. On the bustling streets of Dongdu, a charming young woman hung up the phone in her hand and reported in a soft voice. It's faster than I expected. The middle-aged emperor of Huawu was dressed in casual clothes. He looked around at his own country and said slowly, "Have you found any trace of the child?" There was a flash of resentment in the young woman's eyes, and she shook her head slightly. Her name was Li Yuding, and she was just an ordinary female official in the royal family of East Island. But in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, she was Li Huawu's personal secretary. In the absence of specific instructions from Li Huao, Li Yuding handled the daily affairs of the Purgatory of Heaven capital on behalf of him most of the time. The Purgatory of Heaven capital and the royal family were carefully integrating. In Li Huao's plan, Li Yuding was completely cultivated as the CEO on his territory in the future. Because of her background, he could absolutely trust her. Today, there were not many old people left in the Li family. Among those old people, there were even fewer descendants. Among the descendants, those who had the ability, vision, and means were even rarer. And Li Yuding, among the descendants left by the veterans of the Li family, was the most outstanding. Li Huao had planned to cultivate her slowly, but since her father died in an extremely tragic way in Europe 5 years ago, in order to appease people, he had to raise Li Yuding as soon as possible. This was actually not a good thing. Under great pressure, Li Yuding had not lived an easy life in the past few years. It's a little strange. Li Huawu said in surprise, Xianxia Group is not a small thing. With that child's character, why didn't he come out to stir up trouble this time? Maybe he's afraid? Li Yuding said blandly. It's useless to be afraid. He knows it himself. Li Huawu shook his head slowly. At this time, it's too late to beg for mercy. If I don't kill him, I can't explain to many people, including your father. Li Yuding bit her lip and said softly, Your Majesty, Yuding only has one request. If you can catch that bastard, don't be in a hurry to kill him. Cripple him first. I want to pay him back 10 times or 100 times for what he did to my father. Li Yuding was Li Huazhang's daughter. Since Li Dongqing officially entered the secular world 5 years ago, his shadow could be seen everywhere in the dark world. His first entry into the secular world was really too dazzling. A 16-year-old half-step invincible realm expert. He destroyed the entire Holy Land the first time he made a move. No matter how coincidental it was, since the incident, the whole dark world had been in an uproar and paid more attention to the child who was only in his teens. Today, Li Dongqing was already 21 years old. In the past 5 years, the Purgatory of Heaven capital had chased him more than once. In the beginning, several half-step invincible realm experts joined forces. In recent years, Daybreak, who was at the peak of the invincible realm, had come out. Li Huawu had even taken action once. But Li Dongqing had escaped all of them. This year, Li Dongqing was still at the half-step invincible realm, but all kinds of signs showed that the bastard had gradually begun to grow. Although he had not entered the invincible realm, he already had the strength close to the peak of the invincible realm. This kind of strength had become a big problem for the purgatory of heaven capital. At least, it meant that the situation where Daybreak alone could make the other party extremely embarrassed in the past no longer existed. If Li Dongqing was fully prepared, it was even possible for Daybreak to die. And it was not convenient for Li Huawu to take action himself. It was okay to confirm the other party's position and get ready. But if he always showed up, but he couldn't keep Li Dongqing, this result would be too embarrassing for the purgatory of heaven capital. In 5 years there had been 40 hunts. Nearly 20 experts at the peak of the thundershocking realm and 6 half-step invincible realm in the purgatory of heaven capital had died. Li Dongqing had been seriously injured more than 30 times. Daybreak had been seriously injured once. Li Huawu had failed to take action once. No one could have imagined that Li Dongqing's rise would be so fast. Now he had completely taken over everything that Lin Yuxian had once controlled, deeply rooted in the European continent, and was called Little Donghuang. The purgatory of heaven capital could even clearly feel the pressure that Little Donghuang brought to them. That was the real pressure of facing death. Under such circumstances, the purgatory of heaven capital finally began to gradually change, and once again strongly intervened in the messy European continent. The Holy Land had been destroyed. The purgatory of heaven capital had found a new partner, Rothschild. There was obviously another superpower in the cooperation between the two sides. The Wang family of Beihai. So recently, not only the European continent, but also the situation in Zhongzhou state was also changing. The cooperation between the purgatory of heaven capital and Rothschild meant that Li Huawu had let go of some of the knots in his heart and began to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai had no room to refuse, even if they knew that it was like asking a tiger for its skin. But the rise of Li Dongqing made them more uneasy. In the past 5 years, as Little Donghuang grew up step by step, his cruelty and madness were completely exposed to the people of the dark world. He was a madman who had completely broken out after being suppressed to the extreme. He was unscrupulous and had no bottom line. He never minded killing people or even hurting himself. In this state, he could not even see any humanity. He was a madman who hated the world to the extreme and wanted to drag everyone to die with him. If Li Dongqing suppressed the purgatory of heaven capital, then not only the purgatory of heaven capital, but also the entire Wang family of Beihai would definitely not survive. The cooperation was naturally formed. With the help of Rothschild in the European continent, the purgatory of heaven capital began to suppress the sword pavilion in all aspects. Yes, the sword pavilion. Emperor Dong's palace no longer existed. After Li Dongqing entered Emperor Dong's palace, he directly changed the name of the organization to Sword Pavilion. In the past 5 years, the Sword Pavilion, Little Donghuang, and famous Sword Heaven's Wrath were the most bloody color in the dark world. The purgatory of heaven capital temporarily restrained its edge in the European continent, and then began to suppress the living space of the Sword Pavilion in other areas. The acquisition plan of Xianxia Group was their top priority last year and this year. After 2 years of commercial war, various resources, and the constant confrontation of power, the purgatory of heaven capital finally completely swallowed the Xianxia Group today. This meant that 1/3 of the economic power of the Sword Pavilion was completely swallowed by Rothschild and the purgatory of heaven capital. Next, it was the Senyu Group of the Sword Pavilion. Li Huawu thought silently. He suddenly wanted to know what the bastard could do after the Senyu Group was also swallowed. Boom! Without warning, a violent roar suddenly sounded on the streets of Dongdu. Li Huawu, who was in contemplation, suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance. A few blocks away, a proud skyscraper was shaking in the violent roar. The building was on fire, and black smoke filled the sky. Beside Li Huawu, Li Yuding's cell phone rang at the same time. What? As soon as she heard 2 sentences, her face changed in an instant. "Your Majesty," Li Yuding looked at Li Huawu with the phone in her hand, and her voice trembled. "Say it." Li Huawu looked into the distance with no expression. "Wudong Group. He family, which controls Wudong Group on our behalf. 3 minutes ago, the whole family was destroyed," Li Yuding said in a trembling voice. Wudong Group had acquired the Xianxia Group. And the skyscraper in the distance that exploded and caught fire was the headquarters of Wudong Group. It was done by Li Dongqing. Li Yuding answered the phone and suddenly screamed, "Li Dongqing is in Dongdu. He hasn't left yet. He's on the roof of the Wutong building." Li Huawu's figure instantly faded and disappeared completely. The next moment, under the clear sky, the extremely sharp sword energy suddenly converged into a torrent. The torrent of sword energy crossed a distance of nearly 10,000 meters in several blocks, like a heavenly knife, and chopped to the roof of the Wutong building. The voice of Emperor Huawu resounded through the world, loud and majestic. "Good nephew, since you've come to Dongdu, don't you come to talk to me?" A dazzling arc of 7 colors lit up in the distance between heaven and earth. The colorful sword light turned into a blood red. That was the famous sword of the Lin clan. Heaven's Wrath. The sword intent of Heaven's Wrath tore the torrent of sword energy. In the distant sky, Li Dongqing's response sounded, "Next time for sure." The plain white morning hall was neat and tidy. Inside Worry's manor, there were extremely suppressed cries everywhere. The black and white portrait had been hung up. Wearing morning clothes? Cheng Yu's eyes were red and swollen from crying. She knelt in front of the morning hall, her body trembling constantly. On this day, many people came to the Lin clan. The patriarchs of countless branches of the Lin clan. The core members of the Lin clan today. Everyone who should come came. In the black and white portrait, Lin Yuxian was smiling, which seemed to gather endless brilliance and sunshine. Lin Fengting sat quietly in the morning hall, looking at his son's portrait. In just one night, he seemed to have aged a few decades, and his spirit, energy, and spirit had completely declined. That year, Li Dongqing was 25 years old. The Purgatory of Heaven capital officially acquired the Senyu Group. A large number of elites from the Purgatory of Heaven capital officially entered the European continent. A week ago, the European Alliance officially issued an arrest warrant for Li Dongqing. More than a dozen European powers united to arrest Li Dongqing. 3 days ago, the Heavenly Emperor of Huawu personally came to the European continent, intending to destroy them. Lin Yuxian, an expert at the peak of the invincible realm of the Lin clan and a visiting professor of the Sword Pavilion, fought with the Heavenly Emperor of Huawu to the death and was finally killed by the Heavenly Emperor of Huawu in Ilos. The Lin clan had received the news. The morning hall had been set up, and Lin Yuxian's body was still on the way back. "How is Dongqing?" Sitting in the chair silently, Lin Fengting looked at Dongqing Yu and asked softly. "The injury is almost healed. She can come out in a few days," Dongqing Yu said in a hoarse voice. Li Dongqing returned to the Lin clan with serious injuries half a month ago. He was still in the dormant cabin and did not know the news. "That's good." Lin Fengting sighed softly. "Master?" A hoarse voice suddenly sounded. In the morning hall, the crowd suddenly quieted down. In everyone's sight, Li Dongqing slowly walked into the morning hall. He walked to the portrait of Lin Yuxian, knelt down directly and whispered, "It's not good. My godfather is gone. As a son, I have to see him." At this time, Lin Fengting frowned. "It's better for you to stay here." "I've entered the invincible realm," Li Dongqing said quietly. "No, am already invincible. Unfortunately, my godfather can't see it. It's too long and there are too many words. It's really hard to avoid bugs. For example, Lin Yuxian has only one arm. But how did that arm disappear? Another example is whether the person in another time and space was killed by his mother or by him. I'm completely confused. In fact, this feeling has appeared many times, and I don't even know which chapter 1 wrote it in even if I turn to the previous chapters. It's a pain in the ass. So I'll take these chapters as the standard. It's my fault, I apologize. Chapter 1279. The funeral crowd had dispersed. In carefree villa of the headquarters of the Lin clan. In the cemetery of the Lin clan. In front of the new grave, Li Dongqing knelt and Lin Fengting stood. Lin Youxian's body was brought back by Li Dongqing and Lin Fengting. It was daybreak of the purgatory of heaven capital who sent Lin Youxian back. He was an expert at the peak of the invincible realm and ranked 5th on the world divine list. There was no swords drawn or blood. The two sides agreed on the time and place. The Lin clan brought Lin Youxian back, while Daybreak and the other 3 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm of the purgatory of heaven capital came to the Lin clan together to attend Lin Youxian's funeral. Emperor Huo, who had killed Lin Youxian himself, wrote a eulogy. It was Daybreak who read it. It took 3 days from returning home to the burial. Everything was calm. In the absolute calm, there was extreme depression and silence. Li Dongqing hardly spoke these days, nor did he look at the people of the purgatory of heaven capital. Most of the time, he knelt in front of Lin Fengting's body with Dong Qingyu. Dong Qingyu was crying. She had completely broken down and cried until she fainted several times. Li Dongqing was the most important person in her life. And Lin Youxian was the person who had been with her for the longest time in her life. After she left the Lin clan, she had been with Lin Youxian for more than 10 years. Meticulous care, unreserved guidance, unreserved trust, and incomparably ardent expectations. He was like a ray of light, warm, genial, and inclusive, shining into her soul. He was a teacher and a father. She could play with him, act coquettishly with him, lose her temper with him, or ignore him. Lin Youxian was not married and had no children. Li Dongqing and Dong Qingyu were his children. They were with Lin Youxian in the Lin clan. Lin Youxian and the Lin clan stood in front of them and opened their broad wings to protect them for so many years. Now Lin Youxian had died. It seemed that the pair of wings that had always protected them had collapsed in half. The Lin clan was still bright, but people could smell a sense of dilapidation. Dong Qingyu was in a trance. After several comas, she began to have a high fever and was forcibly sent to the hospital by Lin Fengting. Li Dongqing had been kneeling. He didn't cry, he didn't make a fuss, he didn't move, and he didn't speak. He was just like how he was when he knew the cause of his parents' death, but he still remained silent. All of his emotions were firmly suppressed, bit by bit, in the deepest part of his heart, even his hatred. The sound of rotors whistling could be heard from afar. The helicopter with the flaming flag slowly took off from the worry-free manor. Flags fluttered in the air. The golden flames had seemingly messy but incomparably beautiful lines. They flickered with golden light under the sunlight, exuding an unreachable and majestic aura. It was the flag of the purgatory of heaven capital. 2 years ago, it officially became the flag of the royal family of East Island. Lin Fengting watched the helicopter take off into the distance, took a drag on his cigarette, and said slowly, "The people from the purgatory of heaven capital have left." "You're not chasing?" Lin Fengting stopped talking. Li Dongqing was still kneeling, looking at his godfather's tombstone. On the tombstone, a line of small words was engraved next to Lin Youxian's photo. "I am Li Dongqing's godfather." This was Lin Youxian's epitaph. It was said that his godfather had specifically instructed him to do so before he died. "Ha!" Li Dongqing laughed, his nostrils trembled slightly, and he gritted his teeth tightly. "They are here to send my godfather off." Li Dongqing's voice was calm. "They killed my godfather, so it's a grudge. But they are here to send my godfather off, so it's a favor. If I kill the people who come to send my godfather off at his funeral, it's unfilial of me. So I can't chase after them. Anyway, there will always be a chance in the future." Lin Fengting smiled reluctantly and awkwardly. "Go back." He reached out and patted Li Dongqing on the shoulder. He lifted Li Dongqing up with his wrinkled palm. Li Dongqing took a deep breath. It seemed that his body was trembling slightly because he had been kneeling for a long time. A breeze blew through the worry-free manor. The wind rolled up the treetops of the surrounding olive trees, making a soft sound. Li Dongqing looked at everything around him quietly. His eyes swept over the cemetery and saw the buildings in the worry-free manner, the private forest of the Lin clan, the artificial lake, the neat roads, the garden. They were all very familiar scrolls. He looked at them quietly, with some attachment in his eyes. "I'm not going back." Li Dongqing whispered, "I can't go back." Lin Fengting looked at him. "Master, do you still remember the Dongqing clan?" Li Dongqing whispered, "My family, my grandparents, my father, my mother, my aunt, my uncle, my sister, my brother, and all kinds of relatives, over the past 20 years, have died or gone crazy. Only my sister and I are still alive." Rich and powerful, in more than 20 years, speaking of rich and powerful, the Dongqing clan is the most miserable. I can't let the Lin clan become like this, even if it's possible. Master, I've lived here for many years. It's very good here. I'm at ease and happy. But I really don't dare to take this place as my home. Am I supposed to have peace of mind and happiness? My godfather was supposed to inherit the Lin clan, but now he died outside. In recent years, several branches of the Lin clan have been destroyed and suffered heavy losses. Because of who? Li Dongqing patted his chest. "It's time to go. I can't go back. In fact, I should have gone a few years ago. My birth was a tragedy. But since I came to this world, I should always bear something. If it weren't for my selfishness, my godfather might not have died." "It's not necessary." Lin Fengting said blandly, "I'm still alive, and the Lin clan is not in such a bad situation now. If I really make up my mind to fight, I may not be afraid of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. But I want more than the purgatory of Heaven Capital." Li Dongqing smiled and his eyes became a little strange. "Subcontinent, European continent, more than 50 countries are after me. The purgatory of Heaven Capital, the Wang family of Beihai, I want to have fun with them." Lin Fengting was stunned. He suddenly thought of what Li Dongqing said that day and frowned. "Have you reached the invincible realm?" "Not the invincible realm." Li Dongqing said very seriously, "It's me who has reached the invincible realm." Lin Fengting took a deep look at him and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "I came into contact with martial arts at the age of 12. I chose my own path a long time ago. 9 years ago, if my godfather hadn't lost an arm, I could have rushed to the invincible realm in one go after a few years of forbearance. At that time, I was interrupted, just like writing an article. I was suddenly interrupted at the key point and lost my train of thought." Li Dongqing said softly, "In the past few years, I have been trying to find my train of thought. I was selfish and wanted to be lazy, but I found that the train of thought could no longer be found. There was no way to be selfish and lazy, so I changed my path and took a step forward. Master, now you are no match for me. In the current dark world, I am invincible. For many years, I have been suppressing myself and controlling myself. Now I am tired, so I want to change my way of life. It's good for the Lin clan and me if I leave." Lin Fengting looked at him quietly and suddenly said, "Li Huawu has surpassed the peak of the invincible realm." Li Dongqing shook his head. "No. If you must go, then go." Lin Fengting patted his son's tombstone, slowly turned around, and walked to the exit of the cemetery. "When you want to come back, you can come back and have a look. I am old, but these old bones can still hold on for a few more years." Li Dongqing did not follow him as he had done many years ago. He did not hold his master's hand as he had done many years ago. Silence, quietness, doting, happiness. The past of more than 20 years began to surge from the beginning. The warmth in his memory was disappearing bit by bit and being pulled out. Li Dongqing quietly watched Lin Fengting walk further and further away. Facing the back that was no longer majestic, he knelt down and kowtowed heavily. The wind whimpered as it flew over the cemetery. Li Dongqing's kneeling figure seemed to be blown away by the wind, turning into streaks of sword energy and disappearing. When the palm fell on her forehead, Dongqing opened her eyes slightly. Her eyes were a little dazed, and her face was pale and extremely haggard. Li Dongqing was stunned. He whispered, "Sister, you're not asleep?" "I want to sleep, but I can't." Dongqing shook her head weakly, and her voice was very low. Li Dongqing sat on the edge of the bed and held her hand without saying anything. Dongqing. Yes. Godfather is dead. Yes. I feel terrible. Yes. Li Dongqing nodded. There was no expression or emotion on his face, as if he was a sculpture with only thoughts. Dongqing sighed softly. She stretched out her hand with a bitter smile and stroked Li Dongqing's face. You are my brother, but after so many years, I feel that I can't see through you. I still don't understand what you are thinking. Are you sad? Yes. Dongqing looked at Li Dongqing's eyes silently. After a long time, she whispered, He dragged the Lin clan down. What's next? What should we do? Dongqing's whispering voice was filled with confusion. I'm here to pick you up. Li Dongqing said, We will leave the Lin clan and do what we should do. Before I came, I said goodbye to my master. Go. Dongqing seemed to have never thought about leaving the Lin clan. She said blankly, When? But, where is your sword? The wrath of heaven belongs to the Lin clan. It's not ours. In the future, we won't use swords. In the future, what are we going to do? Do what we should do. They didn't go through the discharge procedures, but it didn't count as leaving without saying goodbye. Dongqing, who still had a fever, leaned on Li Dongqing's back and let Li Dongqing carry her out of the private hospital of Well-Forgetting Villa. The road inside the villa, which was like a small town, was clean and flat. On both sides of the road, there were many shops opened for personal interests, not for profit. Dusk had passed. The shops and street lights were lit up. Many people stood at the door of the shop. They quietly looked at the brother and sister who came to the Lin clan more than 20 years ago. They watched them walk on the road out of the Lin clan. No one sent them off. Along the way, there were sighs. It seemed that many people had predicted this scene. The brother and sister were not surnamed Lin, but for so many years, everyone in the villa regarded them as the children of the Lin clan, the little princess and the young master of the Lin clan. But the little princess and the young master had to grow up. From the moment the news of Lin Youxian's death came, they understood that the brother and sister, who grew up in their love, would eventually bear their responsibilities. Therefore, it was inevitable that he would leave. The light was warm and soft. Li Dongqing walked forward silently with Dongqing on his back. He did not speak or have any expression. He was as quiet as he had been for more than 20 years. Will you come back in the future? Dongqing asked softly. I will come back when I have the chance. Li Dongqing said. He meant to come back, not to come back. At the end of the road was the gate built according to the structure of the Arc de Triomphe when the villa was first built. It stood in the night, magnificent and ancient. There was no pause, no entanglement, no pain. Li Dongqing carried his sister and walked out of Well-Forgetting Villa calmly. Outside the villa was a winding mountain road without lights. The silver moon hung high and sprinkled moonlight on the ground. Li Dongqing looked back for the first time and looked at the ancient gate in Well-Forgetting Villa. He was in a daze, like a child leaving home for the first time. Dongqing was lying on his back watching as well. A tear fell from her face and fell on Li Dongqing's collar. It was a little cold. Li Dongqing suddenly felt a kind of loneliness that almost overwhelmed all reason. His sister on his back was light and soft. He felt her body temperature. Li Dongqing took a breath gently. She was here. Although it was lonely, he would not be lonely with her. It's just the two of us again. Li Dongqing slowly turned around and went down the mountain along the mountain road. Under the moonlight, the shadows of the two overlapped and were elongated. I still remember the scene of my sister carrying me through the downtown of Huading when I was a child. If there is a chance, we should go back and have a look. I don't remember it very well. Dongqing wiped her tears. She was not like Li Dongqing, who had been stimulated by the spiritual power of the transcendent realm. At that time, she was still very young, and many memories were a little blurred. I just remember that the bread was hard. Li Dongqing smiled, tilted his head, and rubbed his face against Dongqing's cheek. Of course, the bread was hard at that time, because the soft part had been crushed into breadcrumbs by his sister and fed to him at that time. The scenes from back then were so clear, almost eternal and everlasting. Now, it's me carrying my sister, Li Dongqing said softly. Brother has grown up. Dongqing gently touched Li Dongqing's head and smiled reluctantly. You have something on your mind, Li Dongqing said. It was not a question, but a very affirmative statement. I just feel a little sorry for Elder Lin, sorry for my godfather, sorry for the Lin clan. Dongqing once again began to cry. Li Dongqing nodded. Yes. Dongqing, Elder Lin just lost his son. He must feel even worse when we leave. He must be angry and didn't come to see us off. Yes. Dongqing seemed to be a little angry. She clenched her fist and hit Li Dongqing's head with tears. But she was not willing to use force. It's better than being exterminated, Li Dongqing explained. The Lin clan is very strong. Dongqing said softly. Li Dongqing nodded. He thought for a moment and continued, the Lin clan can't fight against the whole world. But we can. Dongqing was slightly startled. The two walked along the winding mountain road down Worry-Free Mountain. After officially leaving the range of the Lin clan's headquarters, the outside world was a somewhat empty and cold suburb. Li Dongqing was no longer walking. The vast sword energy slowly gathered in the night. He carried Dongqing and directly rushed to the sky. The sound of the wind flew past them. A faint outline of the sword energy appeared around Li Dongqing's body. The sword energy with a warm aura enveloped Dongqing's body. The two flew higher and higher. It was quiet above the sky, only the bright moon and the starry sky were quietly hanging. Sister! Li Dongqing suddenly shouted. Dongqing tightly wrapped her arms around Li Dongqing's neck. She wasn't afraid of heights, but the two of them were now flying. Carefree manner had already disappeared. She looked down and saw the lights of the entire city reflected in her eyes. Li Dongqing raised his head and pointed to the bright moon in the sky. The sword energy under his feet flew. Do you want it? Dongqing smiled and pinched his ear. You're talking nonsense again. Li Dongqing narrowed his eyes slightly. There was a flash of thought in his eyes, but he did not continue to speak. The sword light flashed. He lowered his head, looked at the dense and prosperous lights of the city under his feet, and whispered, It's just the two of us again. Dongqing Yu softly nodded. These years, Li Dongqing slowly opened his mouth and said, There are too many things accumulated in my heart, too many. Now, I want the whole world to see them. Snow Country. Mormons. In the majestic and solemn hall, the lights were as bright as day. The shining, almost dazzling light filled every corner of the hall, illuminating the relief and oil paintings on the wall. The young servants of Snow Country were busy, and the long dining table was already filled with a sumptuous dinner. Dongqing sat at one end of the dining table. Li Dongqing sat at the other end of the dining table. There were chairs on both sides of the dining table. No one had come yet, so it seemed a little empty. Li Dongqing sat quietly. His eyes were very quiet, looking at the huge antique wall clock on the wall. The sound of the clock hand echoed in the huge dining room, with a constant and crisp rhythm. Master! A dignified and calm housekeeper in her 30s walked in quickly, bowed slightly, and said softly, The guests are all here. Li Dongqing, who was staring at the wall clock, came back to his senses, nodded, looked at the sumptuous dinner on the table in front of him, and said, Let them in. The housekeeper, who looked smart and capable, turned around and left quickly. There was the sound of the door opening in the hall. Messy footsteps came in from the outside, accompanied by the cold temperature of Snow Country and the whistling wind. The cold air entered the dining room from the hall. Li Dongqing's dull eyes seemed to have recovered a little bit of intelligence. One figure after another walked into the dining room. Different appearances, different heights, different skin colors, different auras. The atmosphere in the dining room seemed to have become the venue of the United Nations as they entered. People from subcontinent, Europeans, Americans, non-continent people, everything was there. But the skin color was just their origin, not their position. There was only one position. People from the Sword Garret. Nominally, Li Dongqing took over everything left by Lin Yuxian, and the team left by Lin Yuxian was the team left by Li Dongqing's parents. At that time, they were still called Emperor Dong's Palace. After Li Dongqing appeared, the organization was renamed Sword Garret. He entered the secular world at the age of 16. Li Dongqing, who was 25 years old this year, had been the Sword Garret master for 9 years. In 9 years, the only thing he did was to change the name of Emperor Dong's Palace to Sword Garret. As for the rest of the matters, 9 years had been a mess. From the economy to the wisdom of the people, Li Dongqing did not ask, participate, investigate, or be curious. He was the Sword Garret master. But there was no change in the Sword Garret from the period of Emperor Dong's palace, and Lin Yuxian was still in charge. Now Lin Yuxian had died. Without a leader, the entire Sword Garret was in great uneasiness and turmoil. Li Dongqing could stand up, which made these high-level officials feel relieved. At the same time, they began to instinctively move closer to Li Dongqing. After all, the young man sitting in the dining room at this time was the real young master. They could unite under Lin Yuxian because of their loyalty to the former Donghuang. There was no reason that they would not support Donghuang's son. The high-level officials of the Sword Garret from various fields and places slowly walked into the dining room. The silent brother and sister. The long dining table. The sumptuous dinner. The cold wind of snow country still blew in from outside the door. After a short period of astonishment, everyone bowed at the same time. "Greetings, young master." "Greetings, Mississippi." Dongqing blinked a few times and looked at Li Dongqing blankly. She knew some of these people, but they were all business talents of the Sword Garret. With the purgatory of Heaven Capital constantly suppressing the economic power of the Sword Garret in recent years, there were very few people in this group that Dongqing could recognize. "Sit down." Li Dongqing waved his hand. After they all found a seat and sat down, he glanced around. This was the headquarters of the Sword Garret. 6 years ago, the Sword Garret changed its name, and the headquarters was moved from Italos to Mormons in Snow Country. The tables and chairs here were prepared in advance to ensure that every high-level official of the Sword Garret had their own chair in the dining room of the headquarters. But now when everyone sat down, however, Li Dongqing clearly found that there were at least a dozen empty seats on the table at this time. Li Dongqing glanced around and did not ask why. He just said calmly, "Let's eat." The high-level officials of the Sword Garret responded and began to eat. Li Dongqing held a knife and fork and cut the steak in front of him. His expression was calm and he said nothing. He did not speak, and no one in the dining room took the initiative to speak. The atmosphere was weird and depressing. The dinner ended in a somewhat weird atmosphere. The servants removed the tableware from the table and served dessert and tea after the meal. Li Dongqing took a sip of the tea, and it tasted mediocre. In Snow Country, tea had always been a relatively expensive thing, far more expensive than vodka. Expensive tea was even rarer. The tea at the moment might be very good, but it was still incomparable to the private collection of the Lin clan. Thinking of the Lin clan, Li Dongqing was slightly lost in thought. "Young master." A somewhat low voice sounded. Li Dongqing turned his head and looked around. He found the figure who spoke among the high-level officials. He was very close to him, sitting on his left. He was tall and slender, and his Eurasian face was a bit devilishly handsome. However, the breath all over his body was extremely cold. Among the people present, apart from Li Dongqing and Dongqing, he was the youngest, but he was also the closest to Li Dongqing. "Say it." Li Dongqing said. Han Donglu, the young man gritted his teeth. "I received the news on the way. Han Donglu's plane crashed over England, and no bones were found. There is sufficient evidence that it was done by Rothschild." Dongqing at the other end of the table trembled slightly. Han Donglu, the former CEO of Emperor Dong's palace. He was the current CEO of the Sword Garret. In the era of Emperor Dong's palace, he was one of the core high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace. In recent years, he had retired. He used to control all the economic and commercial operations of Emperor Dong's palace and the Sword Garret. Even in the face of the suppression of dozens of European countries and the invasion of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, he could hold the economic power of the Sword Garret and stabilize the situation. Although 2 of the 3 most important groups of the Sword Garret had been acquired, Han Donglu was still able to keep some core industries. For the enemies of the Sword Garret, Lin Yuxian was dead, and Han Donglu was the person they wanted to kill the most. He was also Dong Cheng's teacher, or a real master. Lin Yuxian trained Dong Cheng to take over Han Donglu's position. Han Donglu, Li Dongqing had some impression of the name. He nodded and said calmly, "If he is dead, then he is dead. Does his family still live?" He had a daughter in the early years, but she died more than 10 years ago. She died in the hands of the purgatory of heaven capital. The young man sitting next to Li Dongqing shook his head. "That's good." Li Dongqing said lightly, "They are all dead. It's easy." The young man, all the high-level people, everyone looked at Li Dongqing with a strange look. Li Dongqing also looked at them and said in a calm voice, "My godfather is dead." The young man sitting next to him gritted his teeth, and hatred flashed in his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Young master, we are incompetent. What should the Sword Garret do next? Do you have any suggestions?" Li Dongqing picked up the napkin to wipe the corners of his mouth and asked, "Young master, we have no way to retreat. We can only fight. I suggest declaring war with the purgatory of heaven capital to avenge Mr. Lin. At worst, we will die." "Ridiculous. It's easy for you to die. What about the young master? What about the Sword Garret? We are not the opponents of the purgatory of heaven capital now. Are we going to court death? Even if we die, we can hurt the vitality of the purgatory of heaven capital. The heavenly Emperor Huawu is still in the European continent. He can destroy most of the Sword Garret alone. How can he hurt the vitality? Let him suffer a minor injury? We should bear it. We still need time. The young master is talented. As long as the young master grows up, he may not be afraid of the heavenly Emperor Huo. How can we bear it? We came to Snow Country from Italos. Isn't it bad enough? Yes, Snow Country is a powerful country in the European continent, but its position in the European continent is very marginal. Do you need me to say it? When the other party attacks, will we have to move our headquarters again? To where? America? And then reduce to going to Africa? Fight. Retreat. Dong. Li Dongqing reached out and knocked on the table. He whispered, "Don't make noise." The restaurant suddenly became quiet. "In fact, there is another choice," Li Dongqing said lightly. All the high-level officials looked at Li Dongqing respectfully. Li Dongqing's eyes were not focused at all. He seemed to be wandering. "I came into contact with martial arts at the age of 12. Until the age of 16, there was no change in the realm. That year, my godfather's arm was cut off. I was going to enter the secular world. My master told me that my godfather had been guarding some of the property left by my parents for these years, which is the current Sword Garret. My master said that people's hearts are unpredictable. He doesn't doubt your loyalty, but I should give you some hope. So he asked me to enter the secular world after I reached the chi-controlling realm. That was the day I entered the 4 realms of martial arts, broke through them, and reached the height of half-step invincible realm. I left the Lin clan, came into contact with the Sword Garret, the purgatory of heaven capital, and the real dark world. It has been 9 years now. The dining room was quiet. Everyone looked at him attentively and listened to him. "Do you know how I feel?" Li Dongqing asked lightly. Without waiting for their reply, he continued, "I'm tired. Yes, for 9 years, I haven't participated in the specific affairs of the Sword Garret, but I still feel tired. Now that my godfather has passed away, the Sword Garret has no leader, so you have another choice." He gently knocked on the table. "I have asked people to check everything inside the Sword Garret. After a while, all the assets and resources of the Sword Garret will be completely counted. Dinner has been eaten. After a while, when the list of resources is put on, you can take whatever you like. Out of this door, the Sword Garret will be disbanded. From now on, you can seek refuge in the purgatory of heaven capital, the Lin clan, Rothschild, or any other country. As long as you don't show up in front of me, I won't bother you. Are you satisfied?" Everyone stood up, a little flustered. I'm not a qualified leader, so I don't want any force. You can leave now. I'll give you the list of resources later. Take whatever you want. If you're not satisfied, you can grab it from others. I don't mind killing people. If you're not satisfied with me, you can kill me. Of course, I'll fight back. Young master. The young man sitting next to Li Dongqing suddenly kicked the chair behind him and knelt down in front of Li Dongqing. Everyone knelt down. The sword garret can't be disbanded. The young man growled with red eyes. Young master, an old man who had experienced the heyday of Emperor Dong's palace, burst into tears. We have to avenge His Majesty Emperor Dong and Madam. The purgatory of Heaven capital hasn't been destroyed. The sword garret can't be disbanded. The dining hall was full of people kneeling down. Only Li Dongqing and Dongcheng were still sitting. The dining table was very long. Dongcheng couldn't see her brother's expression clearly. Li Dongqing sat silently and glanced at the dining hall. I feel a little sick, he said softly. Everyone in the dining hall was stunned. You make me sick. You can think that I'm humiliating you. It doesn't matter. I should respect your loyalty and your persistence for so many years. But I'm sorry. I've been preparing for a long time, but I can't find this emotion. I don't care about you. I don't care about your life or death. I don't care about your attitudes and opinions. Disbanding the sword garret is just a choice I gave you. If you don't want to, you can stay. No one will force you. Revenge is my business. If you want to do it, I won't stop you. So all of you stand up. From now on, you can do whatever you want. Li Dongqing pointed at the door of the hall. The door was still open. The cold wind from the north was endless. Li Dongqing's voice was calm. The door is there. If you want to leave, you can leave. If you want to die, you can die. I can't be a qualified leader, so I can't be responsible for you. But if you die, I will avenge you. That's all. There was dead silence in the dining hall. Most of the people's faces were pale. Li Dongqing had been in the human world for 9 years. They all knew about the existence of this young master, but they rarely had any formal contact with him. Until now. Today, this young man was sitting in front of them, quiet and indifferent. But everyone could see the age in his young soul behind this calmness. It was extreme indifference and boredom. Who wants to leave? Li Dongqing asked. No one said anything. Maybe the young master in front of them didn't care about them. But after so many years of persistence and loyalty, it had become an obsession in their hearts. If they really wanted to leave, they wouldn't have to worry about a way out. But they followed Emperor Dong's palace to the peak and sword garret to the bottom, and they never left. But it was nothing more than revenge. It had even become an unshakable obsession in their lives. Sword garret can't be disbanded. The young man kneeling in front of Li Tianlan gritted his teeth and looked up at Li Dongqing. Young master, we are willing to stay. I'm not your young master. Li Dongqing said blandly. Then, the young man opened his mouth. What's your name? Li Dongqing asked. I'm Azura, young master. This is my name and also my code name. Azura, 28 years old, was a man of sacrifice that Lin Yuxian had secretly trained a long time ago. Now he was the top superior of the half-step invincible realm in the Dark World, or in other words, he had the combat capability of the invincible realm. He was talented. If there was no accident, Azura could at least reach the peak of the invincible realm in 10 years. Li Dongqing glanced at him and nodded. From now on, you'll be in charge of the affairs of the organization. Do whatever you want. Don't bother me. Yes, young master. Azura answered loudly. Li Dongqing frowned. I don't like this title. From now on, call me, he gently raised the corner of his mouth. Call me your majesty. Everyone raised their heads and looked at Li Dongqing in astonishment. The name of the sword pavilion doesn't need to exist anymore. Since you don't want to go, I'll take you to hell. I don't like the title of young master, the name of the sword pavilion, and Mormons. Li Dongqing whispered, from today on, the headquarters will be transferred to England. Your Majesty, Azura opened his mouth. He was a little confused and struggled to say, now, should we, don't you trust me? Li Dongqing asked. Azura felt a chill in his heart and shook his head subconsciously. No, it's just, Your Majesty doesn't like the name of the Sword Pavilion. From now on, will be called Emperor Dong's Palace, the Sword Pavilion. Now, was the organization going to change its name again? In the midst of his chaotic thoughts, Li Dongqing's voice rang in Azura's ears. There seemed to be countless sword energy clanging in his ears and rushing into the sky. Sword Dynasty. Screams, howls, corpses and blood, thick smoke and fire. Chaotic gunshots and violent explosions shook the entire Fog Capital. Fog Capital was already a purgatory on Earth. The killing and the smell of death swept the entire city like a tsunami. The sirens kept echoing over the city. A large number of people in Fog Capital fled in the chaos. Those who couldn't escape all hid in the subway, underground garage, basement and other underground bunkers. Because above the ground, it was a real purgatory on Earth. Blood flowed like rivers, and corpses piled up like mountains. There were traces of destruction everywhere in the city. The streets were full of gullies, the buildings on both sides were smashed into pieces, and there were large deep pits on the ground. The collapsed skyscrapers fell to the ground, the trees were completely smashed, and a large number of corpses were piled up without being sorted out. The fire spread everywhere, and the whole city was ruined and depressed. The whole world seemed to be in a strange silence. No one spoke, no one said anything. All the forces were watching silently. 3 days ago, the European Alliance officially defined the Sword Pavilion as a terrorist organization and offered a worldwide reward for Li Dongqing, the master of the Sword Pavilion. On the same day, the Sword Pavilion announced to the whole Dark World that the Sword Pavilion was officially renamed the Sword Dynasty. The elites of the Sword Dynasty gathered and marched from Mormons of Snow Country to the European continent. They didn't take planes or trains or other transportation. The Sword Dynasty completely announced their marching route. The whole world was dumbfounded. This was unimaginably domineering and crazy. On that day, the young man who completely let go of everything after leaving the Lin clan issued a challenge to the whole world in the most extreme way. Blood and killing gathered, setting off a storm of fighting in the Dark World. 3 days ago in the evening, 1,500 elites of the Sword Dynasty left Mormons and arrived in Wulan State. Late at night 2 days ago, the elites of the Sword Dynasty passed through Black Swan State and entered Bolton. They officially entered the territory of the European Alliance. The Special Warfare Organization to protect the European Alliance made the most domineering response in the face of this crazy and irrational march. An invincible realm expert of the Shadow Throne personally led the team. 10 experts of the half-step invincible realm, 30 experts of the thundershocking realm, more than 500 experts of the fire-flaming realm, and thousands of elites of the ice-condensing chi-controlling realm entered Bolton. They met on a narrow road. Early in the morning 2 days ago, the elite army of the Shadow Throne was completely annihilated. Li Dongqing of the Sword Dynasty took action in person. The invincible realm expert of the Shadow Throne was completely smashed by a stream of sword energy. The sword formation formed by dozens of experts of the half-step invincible realm of the thundershocking realm was directly torn apart by Li Dongqing. None of the thousands of elites survived. 2 days ago in the evening, the Sword Dynasty officially entered Germany. The 1,500 elites seemed to have completely gone mad, like wolves and tigers. The European Alliance was in chaos. Without organizing a second counterattack, the Sword Dynasty entered France. Straightforward, resolute, cruel, and iron-blooded. Just like the march route announced by the Sword Dynasty at the beginning. Thousands of kilometers away. Mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas. No pause, no hesitation. March. Forward with indomitable will. However, from the map, the Sword Dynasty could draw a straight line from Mormons to Fog Capital. All the obstacles were completely shattered in front of the sharpness of Emperor Dong's palace. 24 hours ago, the Sword Dynasty passed through France and officially entered Fog Capital. 20 hours ago, the 2 bases of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital in Fog Capital were completely annihilated. Sword energy flew across the sky, tearing the sky. There was no sign of the enemy. Only the vast sword energy all over the world fell from the sky. 2 swords. Only 2 swords. 2 bases of the purgatory of heaven capital in different directions suddenly exploded. At the same time, the will of the Shadow Throne and the powerful families swept across the entire European continent. The Shadow Throne transferred more than 100,000 elites from all directions to form a joint army to enter Fog Capital. All kinds of armaments were continuously supported. The 2 invincible realm experts of the Shadow Throne, and all the experts of the Thundershocking realm and the Fire-Flaming realm set out at the same time. The 100,000 joint army, the experts of all realms and elites, like a mountain, suddenly pressed against the 1,500 elites of the Sword Dynasty. 14 hours ago, the 1,500 elites of the Sword Dynasty were almost completely annihilated. Only less than a dozen seriously injured people were missing. More than half of the famous high-level officials of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital died in the battle. But the battle was not over. It was even more cruel. Sword light. Sword light. The sword lights that filled the space between heaven and earth were like rainbows. The Sword Dynasty that buried most of the high-level officials was still the Sword Dynasty. Because the sword light was still there. The sword light shone. The endless sword energy covered the sky and the earth, mighty and mighty. Its divine power was matchless and unparalleled in the world. The crazy and sharp edge smashed the skyscrapers in the city, tore the streets, and rushed into the crowd. The purgatory officially arrived. Li Dongqing had no scruples. 25 years, from childhood to adulthood. Too much madness had accumulated in his heart. He wanted to see the whole world. 10 hours ago, 2 invincible realm experts of the Shadow Throne died in the battle. Nearly 60 Thundershocking realm experts died in the battle. Less than 10% of the thousands of elites of the Shadow Throne survived. More than half of the 100,000 joint army was lost. In the purgatory of the world, there were mountains of corpses. Li Dongqing's expression was extremely calm from beginning to end. His physical strength was still abundant, and the sword light was still dazzling. The whole city, the whole European continent, and the whole world were trembling under the sword light. This was the era of Emperor Hu. But it was on the verge of collapse because of the madness of another person. Countless high-tech weapons roared down from the sky, exploded, and the fire soared into the sky. The huge impact completely destroyed the structure of the city. Li Dongqing was moving forward. Artillery fire, the crowd, the army, the so-called elites, a messy battlefield. Anything in front of him was completely torn apart under the sword light. It had no effect. It had no effect on stopping him. He was barehanded. He had no sword in his hand, but the sword energy soared into the sky. He didn't have any worries, nor did he have any worries. His birth itself was a mistake, a tragedy. In that case, what was there to worry about? No force could fight against the whole world. But he, Li Dongqing, could. An hour ago, the headquarters of the Shadow Throne exploded under the sword light. The joint army of less than 10,000 people completely collapsed and began to flee. Li Dongqing did not chase after them. He entered the city from one direction of Fog Capital and slowly walked in another direction. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow. In the scene of Purgatory, the young man, who was only 25 years old this year, looked calm and indifferent. His clothes were as white as snow. He passed by collapsed blocks one after another. He walked through one street after another. An ancient and magnificent castle appeared in his line of sight. It used to be the center of the whole European continent, and it was still a big shadow over the European alliance. They were as rich as a country, and they were strong and valiant. Grand Duke Rothschild's castle. Li Dongqing continued to move forward. In front of the castle, there was a dense crowd of figures. Li Dongqing could not see their faces, because everyone was kneeling in front of the castle, with their heads pressed tightly to the ground. Li Dongqing narrowed his eyes. A voice that was once high and mighty sounded in his ears. The entire Rothschild family pays respect to His Majesty the God of Sword. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's journey, YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.